Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi.
Present.
Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang. Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. O'Leary.
Here.
Dr. Sutter.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Present.
Dr. Reid.
Here.
Mr. Patterson indicated he will be unable to attend today. Mr. O'Sullivan.
Present.
Ms. Dell. Ms. Dell. Mr. President, you have quorum.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined, and we will now proceed with the business portion of our meeting. We will start with the approval of the agenda and minutes. Members, we have the draft agenda before us. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda? All right, seeing no changes, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, being properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Looks like the ayes have it. The motion is approved. Members, we also have the minutes from our June 27 State Board retreat, as well as the minutes from our last working session. Are there any corrections or additions to these minutes from either of those meetings? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move.
That we approve the July working session minutes.
Representative Reid, do you mind amending your motion to approve both the working session and the retreat minutes?
Sure, you can sneak that in there.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to approve both the working session and our June 27th board retreat minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all opposed, please say aye.
All in favor, you mean?
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. All right, this motion is approved. Thank you, members. To members of the public, my name is Zachary Parker, Ward 5 representative and president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the District of Columbia State Board of Education, I welcome our guests and our viewing public to this Wednesday, July 14th public meeting. It is being held virtually due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The video for all of our meetings, including tonight's, are posted on our YouTube page at DC SBOE and rebroadcasted on the District Knowledge Network. Please note that the State Board will begin its recess period July 17th. We will resume our regular meeting schedule with a public meeting on August 18th, where we will invite all members of the public to provide their thoughts on the reopening of schools. More information, including how to sign up, will be shared in the coming weeks. Tonight, the State Board will hear from an expert panel on the intricacies and experiences of homeschooling, continuing an important topic of discussion from last week's working session by Representative Reid, who provided the board with an overview of how homeschooling is currently operating in the district. Additionally, members of the Student Advisory Committee will present their Student Advisory Report, a culmination of important issues such as mental health, safe passage, and distance learning that they have addressed throughout the past school year. They have also compiled their suggestions and recommendations to help improve the student experience and quality of learning and education in the District of Columbia. Tonight, the State Board will take time to consider and vote on that report from our Student Advisory Committee. We will also consider the adoption of our updated teacher retention report commissioned by the State Board and prepared by Mary Levy, which examines the rates of teacher and principal turnover, connects them with a variety of school characteristics, and provides policy recommendations for the district to consider. Before continuing with this, our meeting, I would like to take a moment, as has sadly been tradition for us, to remember the lives that we have lost due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, members, for observing that moment of silence. I am now going to turn to our very special guest, Dr. Grant, our our current acting superintendent of schools here in the District of Columbia. And tonight marks the first opportunity she's had to present with the full State Board of Education. So Dr. Grant, I turn it over to you with a very warm welcome.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, President Parker, and good evening to you all, representatives and members of the public that are joining us this evening virtually. I look forward to the opportunity to meet with many of you individually and meet with the broader community in person. Again, my name is Christina Grant. I'm honored to be before you today, having been appointed by Mayor Blaeuer to serve as the State Superintendent of Education in the District of Columbia. It's good to be with you all. It's good to get the opportunity to serve. And I hope this will be the first of many occasions and meetings of the public with the State Board of Education. Your input is critical and important to me as I begin this great work. I've already had an opportunity to have a warm welcome from President Parker and Vice President Gasoi this week. I look forward to regular, consistent engagement with each and every one of you. In the upcoming weeks, I look forward to having the opportunity to meet and hear from you all individually so that I can hear and listen and learn firsthand what's on the hearts and minds of you all as we start to define our priorities and think about the needs of our constituents, both as we navigate the public health emergency, but also as we think about reopening, recovery, and restoration for our students and families. In the meantime, my team, who, as we discussed, are back in the office even this evening, we will continue to work with you all on two immediate projects. First, approving standards for our education programs, which are critically important to making sure that our educators have knowledge, skills, and mindsets necessary to effectively teach our children. Second, I'm particularly looking forward to starting the public engagement in the upcoming months on the revision of the district's social studies standards. I truly appreciate the board's leadership in prioritizing this work through your social studies standards working group and the publication of guiding principles for the revision. Challenging times like the ones that we are in and the ones we are experiencing require truth-telling as we think about our nation's history. I am hopeful that we will continue to be able to deliver on a social studies standards that really reflect our shared values both in DC and across this nation. The District of Columbia has been a model to the rest of the nation for high academic standards, a vibrant system of strong school options for families in both traditional public and public charter schools, investments in early childhood education, a progressive student-based funding formula, and accessible, meaningful data for stakeholders. These policy choices have led to steady academic outcomes. And in many of my past roles, I have looked to the work in the district to serve as exemplars and proof points for what's possible when stakeholders have aligned vision for what is possible for their children. This next chapter of progress began last week when the United States Department of Education approved our plan for the use of American Rescue Plan elementary and secondary emergency relief funds. It has been a very long time since I've said that out loud in one full sentence. The federal investment will be used to ensure that we can move forward with a safe reopening, supporting our staff, our students, their well-being, the promotion of accelerated learning, and ensuring that our children can return to school in person 5 days a week. Utsey was pleased to hear from many of you and your thoughts on this plan in your June working session, and we believe that many of these investments will be responsible and responsive to the needs that we've heard from you and our stakeholders. We will invest foundational supports for high impact tutoring. We will look at formative assessments in reading and math curriculum, and we will really help our LEAs put the best possible tools in the hands of teachers. We will invest in building data capacity by starting foundational planning and working on Common Core code system alignment. And we will work to address the real mental and physical health needs of our students and teachers through investments in comprehensive school behavioral health systems. These investments will make a real difference for our community as we navigate recovery. I know that in the 2021-22 school year, it will be another challenging and unusual year as we have become accustomed to navigating life through the pandemic. We expect our students to attend school in person every day, and our teachers and staff will be ready to receive them and provide them with a safe and loving space to learn and grow. We will continue to offer remote learning for students that have medical needs with documented medical certification forms. We will continue to provide LEAs in schools with the best possible guidance and support to ensure that learning environments are safe and healthy as we navigate through a pandemic. LEAs submitted their continuous education plans, which will detail the steps that they will take to ensure a safe reopening, and we will support the students and staff's well-being to accelerate learning. We are in the process of completing our review of those plans, and we will be providing feedback to LEAs for revisions, and these plans will be made available for public review on our website when the process is complete in early August. As the mayor stated, the District of Columbia is open and Utsey is open, and I'm eager, humbled, and excited to serve. We are engaged in hard work and we're ready to support and serve our LEA's needs. I've had the opportunity to meet and engage hardworking public servants at Utsey over the past several weeks, and I look forward to providing continued support and leadership to this agency. Again, President Parker, members of the board, thank you so much for the warm welcome into the District of Columbia, into this very special role, and for providing me with the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. It is a distinct honor and privilege to serve this district, and I'm truly looking forward to our work together.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. We too are looking forward to the work ahead. And I would also just like to highlight a few of the things that you mentioned, including the board's social studies work being led by Representative Sutter, who's done a yeoman's job of leading that for the district and the board, as well as the district's approval from the U.S. Department of Education. We hope and look forward to continuing to engage the public to make sure that what our written plan is matches the needs of communities across the district. So we too look forward to being in touch about that. And I know Representative Thompson has held the board to account for that, and we look forward to working more on that. So with that, members, we are now going to turn to public comment. At every public meeting, as you know, we hear testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments become part of our official record. If you, to members of the public, would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Tonight, we will hear from 11 public witnesses. We will be holding to a very strict time limit of 3 minutes. While you speak, there will be a timer on your screen if you set your view to gallery mode. Following our public witnesses, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 2 minutes for questions for our public witnesses. That 2 minutes includes your question, members, as well as the response. Mr. Hayworth will call the witnesses as well as during the question period. He will also mute our witnesses and board members that exceed their allotted time. Thank you for your grace in advance. So with that, Mr. Hayworth, you may begin.
Thank you very much. We'll begin tonight with Mr. Beckerman. Mr. Beckerman, as we move forward, just as Mr. President Parker just said, for members of the public, you will have 3 minutes and there will be a timer on your screen. If you set your view to gallery mode, you'll be able to see the timer. Mr. Beckerman, we'll begin when you're ready.
Hello, my name is Will Beckerman. I'm a recent graduate of School Without Walls High School, and for my senior project with School Without Walls this past year, I researched how lack of LGBTQ inclusive education hurts LGBTQ students and creates unsafe school culture for all students. And from that research, I wrote a paper on why LGBTQ inclusive education is necessary. And I also wrote a bill which, if passed, would require the state board to include the contributions of LGBTQ people in the state education standards of a variety of subjects. I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Lakeisha Jordan, who is the legislative director for Phil Mendelson. I've been working with her to draft and edit this bill, which I'm currently in contact with Phil Mendelson's scheduler to schedule a meeting to present it to him. And I will be asking for his support with the introduction and passage of this bill, which is what I'm here to talk about today. I wanted to ask for the State Board of Education members' support in advocating for the passage of this bill, and if the legislation is not taken up, in implementing broad new LGBTQ inclusive curricular standards. The steps taken by the State Board to create inclusive history standards are a great start. However, this type of education is necessary in more subjects than just sex ed or history, and this education belongs in all classes, and I've given examples of how LGBTQ voices might be implemented in my written testimony as well. Inclusive education standards are necessary for DC public school students because 15.4% of high school students in DC identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual in 2019, and 1.9% identify as transgender, according to the 2019 DC Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Those students are also more likely than their heterosexual peers to report having used drugs, having experienced suicidal ideation, having gone hungry, having had sex at an early age, having had unprotected sex, having been bullied, having been removed from class for disciplinary reasons, and more likely to have been raped and to have experienced dating violence than their heterosexual peers. In addition, in 2016, 43% of DC homeless youth identified as LGBTQ. And these statistics really do highlight how we haven't really fully created safe communities for LGBTQ youth. And while these issues probably won't be solved simply by implementing LGBTQ inclusive education, studies show that it would be a step in the right direction. The Gleason School Climate Survey from 2019 found that when students reported having LGBTQ inclusive education in their schools, they reported less frequency of hearing homophobic remarks, less bullying, and greater feelings of school safety. And that then helped them have better mental health, miss school less, have higher GPAs, higher educational aspirations. And that then extended to, that perception of safety then extended to non-LGBTQ students as well. And we know from history that multicultural education helps prevent the formation of bias and create more democratic communities. I know personally I would have greatly benefited from seeing my identity reflected in school as I was figuring out who I was. So I hope with your support, this legislation can be passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stamper. Did we lose Ms. Stamper? We may have. Dr. Cohen.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me. I am Dr. Stacey Cohen. I am the founder and executive director of City Kids, a 501c3 education program that offers secular, anti-racist, anti-bias education, along with arts, writing, literature, STEM, and sciences, just to name a few things. I'm also a member of DC Area Educators for Social Justice. I have been a high school teacher, but I spent most of my teaching career as a college professor. I received my PhD from Howard University. I am also a homeschool parent. I am here to speak about my personal journey with my son, who is 11. When my son was 3 years old, he was diagnosed with a medical condition that leaves him vulnerable to encephalitis when he gets sick. His medical condition was a large reason behind homeschooling for us. Keeping him from getting sick in a large building with a lot of kids is challenging, a reality the whole world is now living. I found my way as a homeschooler through the help of a welcoming and knowledgeable homeschool community, and my son is thriving. He has a group of very good friends. He is a superb swimmer and a bibliophile, and he is passionate about social justice and astrophysics. He is excellent at math. He is learning to play the trumpet, and he is currently learning German by his request. He wants to be an astrophysicist when he is older, and he will tell anyone who will listen all about black holes. We also have time to focus on African-American studies, which is important to us. My son is biracial. My husband is African-American. We have also spent time doing hands-on science with organizations like Anacostia Riverkeepers, Earth Conservation Corps, the EPA, National Park Service, the AmeriCorps, and more. So there have been some wonderful perks to homeschooling. There have also been challenges. I was thrown in the deep water when my son was diagnosed. My career as a college professor was put on hold and still is, along with my income. My husband was in the military. We are not a wealthy family. No services are available to us to supplement for curriculum purchases, paying for private classes or special education services should he need them. There is no public or private school that can provide the safe environment we need for our child, by which I mean a germ-free environment. As taxpayers who gladly pay into the school system, we have no help. No one provides my child with technology, curriculum, or teaching support. Fortunately, I am an educator, and also no one knows more than me what my own child needs, but it would be helpful and appropriate if some of our tax money that pays for schools that my son cannot attend could be put to use for services or financial support for families like ours who are not only managing homeschooling, but also the heavy burden of serious medical conditions and as a result, severe income loss. Finally, within Section 504 under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, services and financial assistance for children with disabilities and health-related problems are mandated within the boundaries of a public school. Due to my child's medical condition, he cannot attend a public school or a private one for that matter, and as a homeschooler, no services or financial assistance extends to my child. Perhaps the District of Columbia can consider what it can do to serve overlooked students in this population, students like my son. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Bernard.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rahsaan Bernard Jr., and I'm 13 years old. I'm very excited to be here today to share my homeschooling experiences with you. While there has been some doubt of homeschooling's capabilities, I believe it has been the best option for me. Since I moved 3 years ago from Maryland to DC, there have been significant changes in my homeschool life. The only way I used to travel before was by car every time, and it would take us 40 minutes to get to any Smithsonian museum. Then we had to find parking. Now all I have to do is walk down the street and hop on the metro. And thanks to the Kids Ride Free program, it's free for me. I went with my friend to an African-centered technology camp at Howard University in partnership with Verizon, and we took the metro together for 3 straight weeks. My favorite thing about homeschooling is the ability to learn at my own pace and to focus on my own interests. I have the flexibility on when to begin my day and what order to complete my work. It has given me a love for school and learning because I can follow my interests. I love technology and engineering, so I built myself a computer when I was 11, and I had to raise the money, which was over $2,000, and I had to watch hours of educational videos on how to do it. So long story short, I outlined and formatted the speech that you're hearing on the computer that I built. In this summer, I'm helping a DC nonprofit organization with its technology and systems integration. And I am also in a program called Urban Ed, and I'm getting several technology certifications, and I'm going to take my global exam in a few weeks. I also like how homeschooling in DC has allowed me to explore my community. For my civics class, we talked about the Declaration of Independence. Then we went to go see it in the National Archives. For one field trip, after studying Frederick Douglass's narrative, we went to his house in Southeast. Homeschooling in DC gives us the ability to not only learn about topics, but to see those topics and how they are integrated into modern day society. I participate in local sports and academic programs as well. We even have proms, yearbooks, and graduation ceremonies. I get to play for DC's Winners Lacrosse, and I participated in the first tee program at the Haynes Point Golf Course. I'll be trying out rowing this summer with the Capital Rowing Club. The flexibility of homeschooling in DC allows me to interact with so many people, and I hope you will continue to allow homeschoolers access. Homeschooling in DC has been amazing so far. I appreciate all the laws and policies that make it so that we can have this experience. Now I'll be heading to high school soon, and I hope that there are as many great opportunities for homeschoolers then. I am thankful for the opportunity to speak regarding my homeschool experience in DC and hope that my information is beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bernard.
Hello, my name is Rielle Bernard. I am 10 years old, about to be 11 in September, and I live in Ward 6. I've always wondered what it would be like if I was not homeschooled. Would I partake in public school? Would I have met the friends I did? And would I have had the marvelous opportunities I'm currently able to have? Some people really underestimate homeschooling. My experience as a homeschooler has been a thrill. When I first started homeschooling, I lived in Maryland, which was fine, but did not give me the chances I have now living in DC. During different days, we have different schedules. No day is ever the same. Since we have our own schedules, it allows us to engage in numerous activities. Some of the activities we participate include going to museums with fellow homeschoolers, Fort DuPont ice skating, soccer, city kids, Sankofa, visiting libraries, living classrooms, visiting monuments, taking tours, and boating. I had plenty of fun going to the Smithsonian Museum because it taught me loads, and I was able to observe amazing art and learn more about culture. Being extremely close to it is a definite advantage. I also loved visiting the Capitol and learning more about the history of our nation. Even this is homeschooling because I'm learning more about how the district works. Sometimes we even venture to the park down the street to take our back to school pictures. And when I have my own time in the day, I love to draw, write, paint, and read. My favorite is drawing. So having the ability to see the Capitol from my window gives me infinite inspiration. And as I take a glimpse into my future as a homeschooler in DC, I spot bright and positive outcomes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Williams.
Hi, my name is Farrar Williams. I'm a homeschooling parent, and my kids have been homeschooled all the way through. They're about to graduate this year. I have twins. Homeschooling for us has been flexible. They've had a really rich experience like the ones that people are talking about here. I'm also a professional educator, and I was a former classroom educator and small school administrator. I currently teach online at a national level homeschool provider. I also teach locally at Sligo Creek Co-op, which serves a number of DC kids. They're just across the line now in Silver Spring. I'm a college consultant part-time, and I've been deeply involved in the DC homeschooling community for well over a decade now. I've submitted written testimony, but I want to highlight 3 things from it. First, I think that the oversight balance is good as it stands, and I don't want to see the law changed or updated. I think that in the conversation last week, there was some calls for more guidance about portfolios are, and what a portfolio review is. And I guess I just want to make sure that any guidelines that are set stay guidelines. The types of evidence that homeschoolers can provide about the education that they're doing is just as outside the box as homeschoolers themselves. And I want to be clear that any guidelines stay guidelines and that are not, a full list of the types of evidence that homeschoolers can put into a portfolio. Secondly, I want to also speak to special education, that I would love to see more special education services for homeschoolers available through DCPS, particularly things that are not typically provided in the classroom, but are provided as pull-out services, such as occupational therapists and speech language pathologists, and also screenings. One of my kids would have really benefited from access to a speech language pathologist that was difficult for us to provide. Finally, as a parent of high schoolers, dual enrollment in DC is incredibly difficult to access. It's insidery. It's very exclusive. The dates on it have moved around. The DC Cares program is just very difficult to deal with. It's so difficult to deal with that my kids have done dual enrollment through Montgomery College and Northern Virginia Community College, which costs more than 3 times as much for us. It already cost us money when DCPS kids are provided DC Cares money for free and get dual enrollment for free. Dual enrollment, the way that it's done in DC is nothing like the way that it's done at MC or the Northern Virginia Community College or nationwide. And I can say that as a college consultant who works with a lot of homeschoolers nationwide. Dual enrollment is a cornerstone for homeschoolers at this point. It is used widely, and having such an unfriendly system is really hard for DC homeschoolers. So I'd really like to see that improved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we will now be having 1 round of questions. Please use the raise your hand feature, and I will call you in order of questions that you raised your hand. Dr. Reid.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Mr. Beckerman, thank you for sharing about instilling LGBTQ plus knowledge and information into a variety of subject matter. So thank you for that. It's really cool and almost emotional to listen to members of our homeschool community talk about the rich experiences that they're having. And just kind of a personal aside is more or less just making sure, we talk a lot about the word equity, but making sure that, all choices are funded appropriately in our city. It often feels, listening to some of the stories, that, almost private education has more assistance than the option for homeschooling. So that's just something I want to raise for those listening. What else I have to say? Miss Williams, question, because I'm not familiar with all the resources. DC Cares, what could you define that and tell me what that program is? And I talked a lot, so I only have a minute.
DC Cares is, I forget what it stands for exactly, but it's the dual enrollment program for UDCCC. And it stands for like College Access Readiness something, I think. And it's the only way for DC students to get in-state access to dual enrollment. If we do it through Montgomery College or Northern Virginia Community College or online, we pay out-of-state rates. Unlike at those schools, the enrollment period is incredibly short. It's too late to enroll for fall right now, for example. And the enrollment period has historically moved around. They've not always been responsive. When we did deal with people in that program, they were incredibly nice, but it's clearly not set up to serve homeschoolers in a good way.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Sullivan.
Thank you, John Paul, and thank you to everyone who came here to testify. Mr. Beckerman, the bill that you've been drafting, I just got a chance to read some of it, and it's awesome, and I'm truly happy everything that you're doing on this, and I'm excited about the prospects of it. And I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Cohen, and then Mr. Bernard, Ms. Bernard for being here. I think what you guys had to say was very, it was a combination of heartfelt and inspiring. As someone who I feel, well, my brother has created his own computer, and I've sort of seen some of the wonders that innovation can do. So I'm just very happy you all shared your story. And it really does inspire me to think about, as a student representative, what the state board can do, what the student advisory committee can do to actually further that cause. And it's sort of making me think of ways maybe we could do more to have students in high school who are homeschooled on the student advisory committee. So just thank you guys for being here, because it's definitely making me think about my own position. I wanted to ask Ms. Williams' question. I think it may have already been answered, but any additional suggestions and recommendations on how to improve the dual enrollment program?
It would just be nice if it was set up the way that it is at most community colleges, where dual enrollment is an office that students can access in the same time frame that any students who are enrolling in community college can access it, instead of during a very short time frame. It would be nice if the website mentioned somewhere that homeschoolers can also the program. Right now it implies that we cannot, when actually we can. And then I think other people may speak to the cost. For my family, it was not cost prohibitive, but I know that it is still cost prohibitive for some families to access that program, even with in-state tuition.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang.
Great, thank you so much. Will, I have a question for you. Thank you for sharing your work. Would love to follow up and learn more after this meeting as well, and see where we can support you. I'm curious in the pathways that you've looked at to move new LGBTQ curricular standards and more inclusive education standards forward. Have you already engaged or know about the work of our social studies standards committee? And the work that they're doing already currently to revise, and how has that been going, and what have those conversations been like?
So I've been somewhat engaged with the edits to the social studies standards. When it was open for public comment last fall, I made sure to discuss how I would like to see LGBTQ inclusive standards there, as well as more inclusive standards toward different religious backgrounds and things like that. However, I have not been super engaged with it since then, since reading the report that the state board provided since then. So,
okay, great, thank you. That's helpful. And Ms. Farrar, I have a question for you as well, also around dual. Ms. Williams, excuse me, around dual enrollment. I'm curious what other efforts have been done so far to make the change that you're requesting, and how far have they gotten, and what is the pushback, if any?
I don't know. I can just tell you that at one point DC Cares was canceled during the pandemic, and I sent messages to the board, to the council, to my council member about like, can we get into the education committee? Like, why is this like, we need it more than ever. So I have not given a lot of pushback about it because we just have not been able to access it. I would just like to see more access.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all who testified today. Thank you, Mr. Beckerman. I know you and I have yet to connect, but we are going to, because I want to make sure we get you teed up for when our social studies standards, the actual draft standards, are back for public comment, to make sure we can benefit from the great feedback that I know you'll offer. And would love to talk with you more about the legislation you're trying to advance. So consider that you will hear from me before the end of the night via the text that you sent me. I want to thank everyone who testified about homeschooling, and I want to take a moment to speak to our Ward 6 students who spoke. So welcome from Ward 6. It's very nice to see Ward 6 students, Ms. and Mr. Bernard. What I'd love to know is, as you all think about what you would like students who attend public schools or public charter schools to know about what has made homeschooling a different experience for you, what's the one thing you'd want to make sure that all students understand about the experiences you have as homeschoolers?
I would say the one thing is that just that it's a good question. The one thing I would have to say that it's just that we get to travel and go to a lot of different places and see the different things that we learn about more often, and we can see, yeah, that answered your question.
It absolutely does. I love that the city is essentially your classroom. Right. Representative Gasoi got it right there in the chat.
Yes.
Well, when I think of my experience in homeschooling, I think of us like people call us homeschoolers, but for us it's really more like roam schooling, because we visit different places and we barely stay home. We're always out and going to museums, visiting around the city. So
I love that, roam schoolers. I also, by the way, wanted to share your love of being able to see the Capitol out the window. It is a lucky thing that we have in common. Thanks so much for testifying tonight.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
Have y'all, let me start with the Bernards. Have y'all been homeschooled all your educational careers?
Yes.
Yeah.
What, is there anything that you miss? And I know you can't hit what you can't see, but I'm just wondering if there's anything, and I don't want to talk about, I don't want to belabor this at all, but I just wonder, because my grandchildren were homeschooled until they got to high school. And once they got to high school, they became involved with a lot of activities, drama and sports and things like that, and they really weren't able to experience like they did as homeschoolers. So I just wonder, and maybe we can talk offline about that, because I got one more question. But just think about it, and I'll send my email. You can send me an email and answer that if you can't think of it right now. All right. Mr. Beckerman, I just wanted to say hello because we've only talked online, and I really appreciate your sophisticated presentation. And please, I don't know if you've applied for the student advisory. Are you graduating this year?
I did just graduate, but I have a couple friends who are working on similar issues to me that I have told about the student advisory.
You could encourage them to apply for the student advisory committee, because we need voices like yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Wattenberg.
Hi, well, first of all, thanks to everybody. This was very interesting. Special thanks to the students, both the Bernards and Mr. Beckerman, for for contributing to this. My questions are, first, I wanted to Stacey Cohen. I assume it's Dr. Cohen, but I have been totally unaware of this fact that if you have a student who is homeschooled for medical reasons, you're not eligible for any funding. And I just wonder, is there anything more to that, or is it really just as simple as that? I'm a little dumbfounded, really.
Yeah, it's just that. I mean, no student really has access to any services, not just my son. So like Farrar Williams was saying, her son, there were some services her son could have used as well. For my son, there is no school that we can safely send him to. And so it would just be great if we had access to anything that would help, because we're really on our own here. And I think a lot of parents feel like that for various different reasons. But in my case, I can say that, our reason for homeschooling was largely medical. And there's no help for curriculum. There's no help for technology. There's really nothing.
Wow. All right. I'm very sympathetic to that. All right. To Farrar Williams, 2 questions. One is, well, the first is just a comment on the dual enrollment. It is my understanding, I think dual enrollment is very hard for DCPS also. It's only available at a few schools. So if you think there's more to it than that, let me know. And my point being that it probably needs to be improved for everybody, but I wonder if there's more to it than that.
I mean, to me, it feels like a very outsidery process that's set up to be, because the enrollment window is so short and in the past has moved around a little bit. Now they have some dates on there, which I hope are true, because in the past, when I've gone, like at one year that I wanted to use it, I went on to try to get the, it said like, oh, it'll open in late, whatever the month was. And I'm checking and it's not opening. It's not opening. It's not opening. And finally I stopped checking. And at some point I go back and it's already closed. And I think that that's the sort of thing where they're contacting the school counselors at the schools that they're partnered with. And, there's no contact for the rest of us, and this is, like I said, it's an unusual process. And I do agree. I think it should be improved for everybody. I mean, this is a nationwide dual enrollment is growing. It's more and more important. Some states are investing a lot more in it.
I apologize, Ms. Williams. I do have to cut you off, but I appreciate it very much. Dr. Gasoi.
Sorry.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who testified. I want to echo my colleagues who have given special applause to our students who testified today. I agree, very inspirational, and especially because I think you are modeling real civic engagement, and this is what I want to see from our students who attend all of our public schools, that this is the kind of education they're getting, that, at all ages, they are coming and testifying with the level of, just with the amount of poise and background knowledge that you all have and the passion. So I'm really excited to hear more from you, Mr. Beckerman, and to hopefully work with you on this bill. My question, I guess, is mainly for Ms. Cohen, but I would like to hear anyone who wants to comment your thoughts on, would it help to have differentiation, just building on my colleague, Ms. Wattenberg's comment about, needing to homeschool versus choosing to? And should there be services for families who really cannot be served in our public system and yet are paying taxes, as you mentioned, to support that public system? So just would like your thoughts on that, maybe starting with Ms. Cohen.
I think there are a lot of valid reasons for homeschooling, and we homeschool, a large reason was medical, but that's not the only reason, and why we love it and think it's actually providing a really excellent choice for us in our family. And so there, I don't think that there should be differentiation in that. I think that you really shouldn't get into the nitty-gritty of sort of picking and choosing what you think is a valuable reason and then therefore providing services according to that. Maybe some families have more need than others, and that's a separate issue. But there are lots of valid reasons for homeschooling, including, sometimes kids are dealing with racism in the classroom, homophobia, transphobia, bullying. There's all sorts of reasons why kids might be homeschooling. And so a medical condition, while very serious and, creates a burden on our family in maybe a different way, I don't think is really the only reason why someone should be provided services if they're homeschooling.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Representative Gasoi, for that question, because I was having similar thoughts. My question is also actually to Dr. Cohen and I want to better understand options available. Are there no in-person options? Like, do we not have accommodations for students who have certain medical needs? And you're saying like, this is the only option that was available and safe for your child. And then on top of that, there are no adjustments. I mean, no supports around that, or because I am actually at a loss for understanding if we're just not offering anything to students who would be in this situation.
Well, my son's situation might not be something that the board is currently aware of or familiar with. So his condition leaves him with the vulnerability to encephalitis anytime he gets sick, so even a cold. So schools can't accommodate that. There's no way that they can, create a bubble for him in a school. Private schools can't accommodate this either. There are a lot of kids with his condition who wind up homeschooling because of it. And so
can I ask just because I think I know where you're going, do we not also have virtual options either? Like, we actually have virtual options pre-pandemic too. Like, do we offer nothing is what I want to know.
So the virtual options pre-pandemic, I'm not aware of, to be honest, but also that's, as we have learned, a lot of the country has learned, an entirely virtual option for school is actually not ideal, both physically and emotionally and mentally for a child. And so that would not even be an option that would really be worth it for us, wouldn't be a healthy choice for my child. So what I did was I created a nonprofit. It's a very, very small education program. He's not going to get in a private school or public school a small education program like this. And I have a rule where no one is allowed to come sick ever, no residual symptoms, no sniffles, nothing. And that has really been very beneficial to him. It helps keep him from getting sick. And then what has happened is the other kids who are homeschooled during the program just because they like the program. I see one of my students here today. And so as I teach in our program, but also we have had other students with the same diagnosis who've been able to join our program, and kids with other immune system issues who've been able to join our program. And we've been able to provide an environment for them where otherwise they might be alone at home at the table just with their parent.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. I apologize. I do have to stop the conversation there, but please do follow up with us, and we may send all of you some emails asking for additional involvement. At this point, feel free to go ahead and log off the meeting. The meeting is live streamed on YouTube, and you can continue to follow the meeting there. Thank you very much for being here. Members, I'm going to be letting in the next panel, so stand by. Okay, I believe our next panel is here. So for the panel, I just want to go over the meeting rules or rules of order or whatever you want to call them. Each of you will have 3 minutes to testify today. And after each person testifies, we will have one round of questions from members of the board. I will be sticking pretty strictly to the clock. If you'll switch your view to gallery mode, you will see a timer at the as one of the camera views, so you can know exactly how much time you have left. We will begin today with Mr. Reedy.
Good evening, State Board members and those who are watching online. My name is Ethan Reedy. I've lived on Capitol Hill for 30 years. My wife and I homeschooled our twin sons from kindergarten through high school. They both graduated from college this spring, one from George Washington University here in town, and one from the University of Richmond. And we continue to homeschool our 11-year-old daughter. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be heard by the DC State Board of Education once again. I was one of several parents who worked closely with Utsey and the Board of Education back in 2008 when the current regulations were passed. At that time, the DC homeschool community was smaller and less connected. We needed a forum to discuss these issues and to respond coherently. In response, we formed the DC Home Educators Association. The goal of DCHEA was to bring together the diverse DC homeschooling community so that we could address issues unique to homeschoolers, regardless of our educational philosophies, religious beliefs, or ethnic backgrounds. That group was very active during those initial years and has maintained its presence since. I've served as the president of that organization. I listened to last week's working session live stream, and I understand that you are wanting to hear about homeschooling successes and challenges. I think I can provide some of both. On the success side, if I might show a bit of pride in my own sons now, they both excelled academically as homeschoolers. Utilizing a combination of our own teaching, online courses, and a couple of courses at the DC Community College, they both scored a 4 or higher on between 8 to 10 AP exams each. In 2017, they were 2 out of the 3 National Merit Scholarship winners from the district. Both received scholarships from high caliber colleges and both graduated from college with honors. One will be leaving DC in a month to begin a PhD in mathematics. The other would like to spend his life working in the district in the area of criminal justice. On the challenges side, I was glad to hear the conversation in the working session, and again that we've heard this evening, about extending services to homeschoolers that would normally be covered in an IEP. Many parents of special needs children do choose to homeschool. It is often the best way to meet their unique educational needs. In our case, while our sons excelled academically, they did still have needs that would normally have been met under an IEP. Specifically, they needed access to speech therapists. We asked Utsey staff whether they qualified for help provided by the city, and were told they did not. We did find private therapists, but the cost made it difficult to pursue consistently. I would be happy to talk to any of you more about our experience. As I said, we continue to be homeschooling parents. Our daughter Lily is 10.5 years younger than our twins, so we have 6 years of homeschooling still to go. Lily is a very different child from her brothers, so we find ourselves having to reinvent many of our processes. Homeschooling is always an adventure, but one that is well worthwhile. Please let me know if there's any way I can help you to understand our needs and concerns better. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mason.
Thank you. I'm Ronald Mason, president of the University of the District of Columbia, the public institution of higher learning in and for the nation's capital. I didn't know that we were going to be talking about dual enrollment tonight, but let me just say this, a couple of things. One, that program is primarily funded by Utsey, and the funding has been dwindling and then cut. So that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been available. But the good news is that it's going to be expanded in the 22 budget. We've hired a dual enrollment director, and if the folks who, but I don't know anything about it from a homeschooling perspective. And so if someone wants to steer those folks to me so that as we rethink the program, we can get their input, my email is ronald.mason@udc.edu, and I'm easy to find, okay? But the real reason I'm here is to talk about a challenge for all of us, which is that nationally and locally, there's a real issue about students being able to transition from high school to college, especially students with life insecurities. And we have a lot of students like that at UDC. And so we lost a lot of enrollment last year, transitioning from high school to college. And it looks like it's going to be just as bad or worse this year. And so what we want to do is make sure that money is not an issue when it comes to students being able to attend higher education. So I want to tell you about our UDC RISE, Recovery, Intervention, Support, and Engagement Program, and hope that you'll help me spread the word. So on the merit side of the house, anybody graduating with a 3.0 or above gets a scholarship. If they have a 3.7 or above, they get a scholarship, full ride, and housing. In addition, if they have need, we give them free books, free devices, and a $1,000 additional scholarship per semester. That's on a merit basis. On a need basis, we're giving students free tuition for the entire year, $1,000 scholarship per semester, free books, and additional student support, so that a student who has need, and need is generally defined as anybody that has a family contribution of $1,500 or less, anybody that has need can go to UDC for free and also get an extra $1,000 per semester plus free books to attend school. And so I just need you to help me spread the word that we're taking money off the table as a challenge to going to higher education. And we need to find as many of these young people who have dropped out of the learning continuum and get them back on track as soon as possible, because we don't need them to have any learning loss. So thank you for your 3 minutes. Thank you for Fraser O'Leary for telling me about the meeting and giving me a chance to sign up and speak. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Ms. Blaeuer.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now. But my name is Maria Blaeuer from Advocates for Justice and Education. We're the District of Columbia's Parent Training and Information Center. I apologize in advance for not having my camera on. I'm struggling with some technology issues today. But I really wanted to just take a few moments to frame some of the conversation that I know you're going to be having around homeschooling. Particularly, I think there's 3 areas that I would really like you to look at and think about as you do some more fact finding and exploration around homeschooling. The first is the relationship between homeschooling and special education. I think Mr. Reedy's comments were really very reflective of a lot of families' experiences. Students with special education needs are often attracted to homeschooling for a variety of reasons. I would also encourage you to really look at the relationship between homeschooling and student safety. Based on our conversations with families, it is often a feeling of unsafeness and a fear of danger, particularly gender-based violence and intimidation, that attracts families to homeschooling. And then also look at OSSE's governance and kind of the administrative work around homeschooling. I think those are the 3 big buckets that are really worth exploring. And I'm very mindful of the time. So I do just want to flag that I think some conversation, particularly around that first section, looking at homeschooling and education, looking at the connection between the district's child find obligations and how those obligations are met is really worth examining in depth. And Mr. Reedy's comments about children with disabilities who are homeschooled not being eligible for services. This was a huge change that happened a few years ago in the district, and it's, I think, very unfortunate because this means that homeschooled children who have disabilities no longer have access to equitable services, which puts them, I think, at a real disadvantage and limits the ability of families to access homeschooling. My written comments will be submitted as soon as I have working internet again, hopefully later this evening. And again, I'm happy to talk and answer any questions you have. And again, thank you very much for having me, and I apologize for my lack of video.
Not a problem at all.
you.
Thank you so much for being here. Mr. Williams.
Okay, can you hear me or see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Hi, I'm talking about something different, but my name is Jimmie Williams. I'm president and CEO of the Washington Literacy Center. And I wanted to talk to you all briefly about the state of adult literacy, specifically literacy for the adults living in the District of Columbia reading at the lowest levels. So the reason I'm here is that right now we do have a major problem. The largest, we're one of the larger adult literacy programs in the District of Columbia that focus exclusively on adults reading at the lower levels. But the 3 entities that do it the most are really having a difficult time. But more and more, the biggest problem that we're having is when it comes to literacy is that DC does have a literacy problem, and those numbers have not been changing for the adults that read at the lowest literacy levels. So let me just give you a few numbers real quickly. 1 in 4 DC adults ages 16 and between ages 16 and 74 are reading at the lowest levels. That's 119,304 adults that read below the first grade level. 1 in 3 adults have math levels below the first level. And that's roughly 179,844 adults. 49.8% of those adults live in Ward 7, but a majority of those adults live in Wards 5, 7, and 8, and then 6 is next. Our biggest concern here is that the struggle for workforce, as we try to move adults on the workforce level, we have adults that are not self-sufficient, they're not moving toward workforce or learning levels, and they're perpetually stuck. But this pandemic has made life even more difficult for them and the organizations that provide that support. So I'm here to ask, because the real focus is that whenever it comes to indoctrinating them and getting them back and moving them toward self-sufficiency, we're at a standstill. But organizations like the Washington Literacy Center, Southeast Ministry, which is located in Ward 8, and LVA, which is located in Ward 5, 2 of those organizations are financially struggling to meet the needs, the much needed needs of their communities. And we're looking for ways and opportunities that we can better serve the adults that are struggling in the District of Columbia. One of the things we recognize is that these adults are not likely to move. They don't get the jobs. And most of all, they want to become self-sufficient. And so we need a system that's going to actually allow funding for them. It's drastically underfunded, and we need something that specifically focuses on serving the adults in those institutions that serve those adults. So with that, I want to be cognizant of my time. I'll stop here, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Covin. Mr. Covin, are you here?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No problem. Begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So thank you to all that have allowed us to speak. I wanted to, I will issue a written statement and I'll retype it, but I'm gonna go over some bullets. I have 4 daughters. My wife issued a written statement. My daughters are currently 20, 17, 15, and 11. And I just wanna go over some of the achievements that they've been able to complete while homeschooling. I had one to dance in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Coliseum for the opening ceremonies of the Special Olympics with Debbie Allen's dance company, performing with Stevie Wonder. She also spent 6 weeks at in LA with the Debbie Allen Dance Company. I have 2 daughters that have studied trapeze, unicycle, gymnastics at the camp is in New York. It's a camp in New York. I can't think of the name. I have a daughter that studied guitar. She's the lead chair for 3 years at Levine School of Music, and she's being mentored by Ariel O'Neill, who is the guitarist for Beyonce, Alicia Keys, and others. I have one daughter that is currently in ice skating right now. She's on the traveling synchronized ice skating team, and they won the gold medal at the Mid-Atlantic region before the pandemic. One was a gymnast in Silver Spring. I got a daughter who was one of 13 teens who was selected for a paid internship with district government. My daughter, Christian, worked as the assistant for the DCHR chief of staff, tasked with reviewing and reporting out on the areas of opportunities with performance management within district government. I have a daughter who met and danced ballet privately for Misty Copeland, who was the lead dancer for the American Ballet Theater. I have a daughter who performed and sang in several stage plays at Sitar Art Center in Northwest, to include Rent, Fiddler on the Roof, and Annie. A daughter just scored just short of 1,200 on the SAT. She will be taking the test again in an attempt to hit the 1,300 she needs to qualify for the veterinarian scholarship she is seeking. She was also a daughter that was selected for a paid opportunity with the 2021 Tuskegee Institute Veterinarian Camp and tasked with creation and reporting out on a science project. I have a daughter who danced professionally starting at the age of 17 with an African dance company. I have 2 daughters who during the pandemic successfully completed cybersecurity and IT fundamentals with Urban Ed. And at the graduation ceremony, there were 3 tablets given out, one to my daughter who's 15, one to my daughter who's 17, and the other one went to RJ, Mr. Bernard. And in closing, I'd like to share that my oldest daughter, who's 20, has been offered multiple scholarships, only to be told by UDC that she must take a GED test after taking the AccuPlacer to take any college math for credit. She completed 27 college credits in the CARES program and was selected as the 17-year-old vice president of the UDC Community College Honor Society. She turned down the presidential scholarship to attend Temple University, where she's currently a junior and has a 4.0 GPA. So if the CARES program works and she gets 27 credit hours, why are we requiring them to take a GED when we're not requiring the DC public school students to take a GED?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Members, we will be having a single round of questions. If you have questions for this panel, please feel free to raise your hand in the chat and I will call on you in order. Dr. Reid.
I am fast on the draw tonight. All right. Maria, can you help me? Because for families who like to go to private schools, they get an ISP, individual service plan, with some level of support, possibly not a complete as with the IDA, but there's also some set aside from Utsey. You're good at this stuff. I'm a little rusty. Maria Blaeuer. Did she leave us? Oh wait, I don't see her name. Oh, the internet might have got her. Okay, that will be my follow-up question to Maria. President Mason, really appreciate your accessibility. I think the reason why UDC is by the people and for the people because of your ability to be accessible. I think you are a standard of our agencies and actually a model. So we greatly appreciate your willingness to come and talk to us. And yeah, I think my question was for Maria Blaeuer, but I have time. Mr. Covin, I was confused about one, can you talk about, why did your family elect homeschooling option, and then a little bit about that GED? I only got a minute, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, your question was about the GED?
Well, let's start with why did your family elect homeschooling? That might be the only question I can get.
Actually, I have 4 daughters and my wife and I went to high school together. I thought I was gonna have all boys. God had another plan, but it was due to, initially I had a problem with education. Though I have a college degree, I think the public education system failed me. And so we were able to find the resources in the District of Columbia in order to successfully homeschool the entire time.
Thank you. That completes my time. I yield.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. I also had questions for Maria. So I'll hold those and hope that we get a chance to follow up with her, because I am very interested to learn more about the fact that this shift away from special ed services is relatively recent from what she said. So I'd love to learn more about that. I'll use my time to thank Mr. Williams for coming, and it's nice to see you again after having seen you at the Barracks Row Parade. I'm looking forward to talking more about literacy work, especially in Ward 6. Mr. Colvin, congratulations to you and your family on what sound like outstanding young women who have come through homeschooling in the district. Mr. Reedy, thank you for testifying tonight. I read your testimony and your email, and I appreciate you sharing your family's experience this evening. And Mr. Mason, President Mason, I'm excited to reach out to you. I have a couple questions for you about a few things that have come up with Ward 6 residents. And so I'm glad to have your email and we'll follow up directly. I'll yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson.
Awesome. So first, I am super excited to see President Mason here because I tend to agree that he is awesome. My mom went to UDC. She's a Firebird and a GCPS teacher. I look forward to just doing a better job of being a support to you all, because you all really are trying to reach out to the community and connect with community, and you all are really our most affordable option, aside from the program you talked about today. So thank you for that. Mr. Williams, thank you for coming, not just because you're a Ward 7 resident, but because I know you're trying to provide more of your services to people in Ward 7 and across the city. I'd be curious if you could just take my last minute of time to talk about why adult literacy in particular is a barrier, and if you can elevate also just some of the resourcing challenges you've seen in operating your program.
Sure, and thank you. It's a good question. So adult literacy, I think when you look at jobs and when you look at employment and when you look at generational education, adult literacy is important because families who are not able to read and families who are low literacy, then their children become low literacy. All of the things that you need to become viable in the workforce, you're lacking. So they're not being really passed on to your children. So it's generational. But as the city really embarks on moving workforce and trying to get people gainfully employed, one of the things I usually say is that for the 21st century demands, which are heavy toward digital literacy, reading is more important, understanding is more important, communication is more important. That means we have a generation, we have people that are perpetually stuck in low income, low wage jobs. And also, incarceration becomes higher. The highest number of people who are incarcerated are usually people who are reading below the 6th grade level. So in terms of being able to stem a lot of those systemic problems, we're stuck. And in the District of Columbia, those numbers have not moved in over 20 years when it comes to low literacy. This study, the numbers that I quoted were from 2020. They're actually higher. So when you try to move the education needle, one of the problems is that is not moving. And then we have a new generation of people who are coming out of our schools in the same predicament. They're low literacy and they're graduating. So I hope that answers your question. And thanks for the opportunity.
It does. And that's all my time. And I want to stay out of trouble this evening.
Thank you. Dr. O'Leary.
Good evening, President Mason. It's great to see you again. As Ms. Thompson said, I've been a Firebird since 1981, and I'm all in for the education that students get at the University of the District of Columbia. I just taught a class this afternoon, and thank you so much for bringing that information. I have two questions, not for you. Mr. Reedy, I mentioned earlier that my two grandchildren were homeschooled, and my grandson has a speech problem, and he was in Fairfax County, and he received the support from Fairfax County, even though he is being homeschooled. Is that not what happens in DC?
It has been some years since this was an issue for us. This was when my kids who just graduated from college were much younger. But we were told that we had no access to those services. My understanding is that if you're in public school, the charter school system, or in private school, you do have access to some of these resources through the city, but homeschoolers are missing from the picture and don't have access to a lot of the services that every other student in the district does.
Thank you. I'm sure that we'll find out more about that with our panel, which follows this, but I would just like to say that it is completely wrong for the system to not treat every child as someone who's special. And so that any student that's being educated, Mr. Covin talking about his superstar daughters, I don't know how you make it through four girls in the house, and they must be really loud with all of them doing all those things. But every kid deserves the chance to fly, and we can't allow any child not to be able to be serviced.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Mr. Chang.
Thank you. President Mason, it's also very nice to hear from you. I've had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Burton and Dr. Kelly from your team about their work in structured literacy instruction. As you know, NCTQ rated and ranked UDC the highest in the region for your work there, and that's of particular interest to me. Would love to follow up with you and learn more about how we can support that work in particular moving forward. I think it would be transformative for education for all of our students if we can figure out that pipeline. My question is also to Jimmie, Mr. Williams. I'd love to give you some time to talk a little bit more about the connection between adult literacy and other literacy, right? Whether that be sort of, you mentioned the work that we're from our system, K through 12, we're passing a lot of folks to you that didn't fully learn how to read. And then also the other way around, right? The research that shows the connection between having a parent or guardian who can guide you through your learning and what that does for younger learners as well.
Yeah, so sure. Let me start with with the K through 12. And so what we have, and one of the focuses that we have, is really looking at adults, young adults that are 18 through 24. They graduate K through 12. They don't have the skills that they need. Some of them even make it into college, but the question is, are they able to sustain? Usually they're not, and that's when they return back to us. But it's a lot harder then, and then they have other issues. And if they happen to have children, then and they're looking for employment, they don't qualify. So we're finding that we've got young adults that are in this situation. They want reading and they want basic math skills, and they're stuck in low wage employment. And then their parents are perpetually unemployed, and a lot of them are really, they've been incarcerated, or it's so they struggle with that. And these adults, we find that they also have issues with crime. So how do we get them back on track? How do we mitigate what they have, and how do we provide those essential skills, the reading skills, the workforce skills, the literacy skills? And the bottom line is, all of that starts with the ability to read, to comprehend, to be able to write, to be able to effectively communicate, and to have those math skills. And so we're finding that in this city, that when you try to move adults beyond, and so you can enter as many workforce programs as possible and develop creative workforce programs. But the question is, do they complete those workforce programs? And so I think the city has reached the ebb where you have to focus.
Mr. Williams, I apologize. I do have to cut you off, but please feel free to continue in the chat with additional comments.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you. I'll stop here. I think I had my point.
Thank you.
And thanks for the opportunity.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to everybody. This has really been enlightening about the homeschooling. A special thank you to President Mason, both for the program that you described and the generosity with the students, and also for being the host and housing the swing space for the students that live near me from Eaton and Merch. Everybody has loved being at UDC, and I hope it nets you some interesting students in the long run. My question is for Mr. Williams, and it's really this, it's broad, which is, I often talk to people about my impression that our charter sector includes this great adult schooling operation, that there's these multiple adult education charters, and they're funded through the city in some particular ways. And it seems quite systemic. And so my question really is, how do you relate to those other schools, and how do we think about this in the city as a system?
Well, great question. And the real key point is those charter schools, and some of them like Academy of Hope, do an excellent job, but their primary focus is the adults that are 6th grade and above. And most of the charter schools, that's the sweet spot, 6th grade and above. And for a lot of the programs we have, it's a 221 CASA score, 6th grade and above. And so when it comes to the area that we're serving, it's the most neglected one, which means they can't even get into most of those charter schools because they don't have the scores. They're not at the 6th grade level. They're not and they have low math proficiency.
Is there a reason? Is that something that should be looked at? Is allowing or encouraging charters to handle students with lower proficiency?
Well, I think
it's a different thing.
I think it's a different thing. I think you let charter schools focus on what they do best. And I do think there's a large demographic of sixth grade that need it. But I think you have institutions such as ours. We've been around since 1963. We specialize on that, and we specialize on barriers such as dyslexia. So what I'm looking at is it's the funding. Charter schools average anywhere between 11 and 14,000. We get around whatever, usually below 8,000. It takes 8,000 for me. That's half of what you get for charter schools. So I think it definitely becomes a funding and capacity issue.
So,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Williams,
much.
before I get cut off,
I'm sorry, Ms. Wattenberg. I'm sorry, Ms. Wattenberg. Ms. Wattenberg. I'm sorry, Ms. Wattenberg. We have to move on. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for all that you do, including homeschooling parents. My question first is for Mr. Reedy. I was just wondering, in your work with the Homeschool Association, I think it was called, do you have an answer for the question that was raised that was directed originally to Ms. Blaeuer about, the loss of access to services for homeschool students, for special ed services?
I don't have a certain answer. I can only speak from my own experience, which was that, the situation I'm talking about was at least 10 years ago, maybe longer. So there may have been some changes more recently, but that it goes back further than that, in my understanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then my other question, well, first, I just wanted to also thank Mr. Mason, President Mason, for the work that you're doing to make secondary education accessible, and just please keep us in the loop if there are ways that we can be helpful to you in getting students into that, pipeline. And then finally, Mr. Williams, my question to you is, you had mentioned that these services that you offer are underfunded. Why is that? Is it mainly lack of understanding, or and I have only 30 seconds, so.
Structurally, I don't think they lean toward the lower level literacy. I think there's pressure for results, and those results really mean that the lowest level performers and those that typically take the longest to move up the ladder. Our adults take 10, 3 years, 4 years, some of them less. But overall, the investment is how fast can you move them up and how fast can you move them out. Those levels take much longer, minimum usually 2 years.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for asking the question.
President Parker, I'll turn it to you to close out.
Thank you all for joining us. President Mason, I want to extend an invitation for you to come back regularly. And maybe we can establish a new tradition to hear from you on a monthly basis. I'm going to direct my question to Mr. Williams. I'm glad to see you here tonight. I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Williams earlier in the week, and I just want to underscore the solution as you see it in the short term, but also long term, for us to start better targeting that adult population that you're talking about that we're not currently addressing.
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. But, of the three entities that really focus on it and where we really address those barriers, two of them are financially struggling. LVA is struggling. Southeast Ministry, which is located in Ward 8, is struggling. And we've had our struggles. We're not serving what we would like to serve. And again, that's a funding issue. That's a focus issue. And what we need is a funding stream that specifically focuses on this demographic, which is the most marginalized and problematic in the District of Columbia.
Thank you. And just to circle back on that, for those that may not understand, when you say a funding stream, can you just distill a little bit more why the current funding streams may be challenging for those three programs that you're referencing to take advantage of currently?
Sure, definitely. So most of the funding that for these programs that come from the OSSE, Office of State Superintendent of Education, while they do a great job for some of the larger entities, I think the way it's structured, it doesn't really benefit the smaller organizations like us that are really specific in serving a very specific, slower moving group. I think there's probably federal pressure and other numeric pressures that they have to achieve it. But what it means is that those groups that have historically and for the longest period of time served these groups and have the expertise. We are not funded. We are out in the cold. And I think of those three groups, none of us are receiving any direct funding at this time. As a matter of fact, I know we're not.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. That is my time. And to the entire panel, or not panel, but to all of our public witnesses, thank you for joining us tonight.
And thank you.
That was a great discussion. Members, we are going to turn to our panel for the evening, focused on homeschooling in the district. We heard several public comments focused on homeschooling, so this should be a continuation in many ways. The state board, among its variety of roles in the district, has authority over the state standards of homeschooling. Homeschooling is a private, parent, or legal guardian directed education program for children who are subject to compulsory education laws in the state. In the district, children between the ages of 5 to 17 require compulsory education. The number of students in the district being homeschooled has nearly doubled to 764 students over the course of the last school year. I will repeat that. The number of students in the district being homeschooled has nearly doubled to 764 students over the course of the last school year. And I really want to acknowledge our colleague, Representative Reid, who has really shined a light on this and the impacts, particularly in Ward 8, but for all of us across the city. Following a preliminary discussion at last week's working session, the state board has invited tonight's panel of 5 experts to share their experiences and the intricacies of homeschooling. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to provide comments, and then we'll have 2 rounds of questions from members. Our panelists are DeLise Bernard, who is the founder of Surviving Homeschool, and who is also a DC-based homeschool parent. We have Cheryl Field-Smith, the associate professor at the Department of Educational Theory and Practice at the University of Georgia, who is also the co-founder of blackfamilyhomeschool.org. We have Dr. Rochelle Matthews-Somerville with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and she is a Maryland homeschool parent. And we have Dr. Ama Mazama, Associate Professor and Director of the Graduate Programs and Department of African American Studies at Temple University. And our last 2 panelists, we have Keri Rodrigues, co-founder and founding president of the National Parents Union, and is a Massachusetts-based homeschool parent. And last but not least, and I hope I do not mispronounce your name, and apologies if I do, Monica Utsey, co-founder of Sankofa. Thank you. Co-founder of the Sankofa Homeschool Community and Collective, who is also a DC-based homeschool parent. So we will go in the order that I called your names. And DeLise Bernard, I will turn it over to you to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Dr. Reid, for the invitation and your leadership in seeking a temperature check on the DC homeschooling community. My name is DeLise Bernard, and I live in Ward 6. Shout out to Representative Sutter. And I'm married to Rahsaan Bernard, the president and CEO of Building Bridges Across the River in Ward 8. We have 3 children who are 8, 10, and 13, 2 of whom you just heard from. And during the pandemic, I did found Surviving Homeschool, where my partner, Derica O'Doy, and our team support over 8,500 families. However, my primary job is the education curator for our homeschool. So it's with these experiences that I sit before you today. So I heard your questions in the working meeting. So I just wanted to get started at the beginning. Each year, we're required to submit a notification to homeschool. I use the online form, upload a picture of my diplomas, and later receive a notice of eligibility to homeschool for each child. And now you're official. Now, what's interesting to note from the outset is that each homeschool is as varied as the 764 students on the DC homeschool rolls. Some participate in co-ops, some design their own curriculum, some come together for field trips, and some are primarily at home. Many of us do some version of all of the above. Now add to that the learning style, special needs, and you get my point. Every homeschool is different. So I'm going to tell you the story of our homeschool journey, but it's just one example. From my son's kindergarten year, I had a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old. So suffice it to say, I had to get really creative about homeschooling. We spent our days out exploring the area and our evenings homeschooling when daddy returned home from work and could take those little ones. But I learned quickly that the term homeschooling can be a misnomer. What a lot of us do is really roam schooling, like Rielle said, using the entire DC metropolitan area as our schoolroom. And so for the first few years, I taught every subject using formal curriculum like Shirley Grammar and Singapore math, and then also created my own. But as they've grown older, participation in these co-ops and tutorials you've heard about have been even more integral to our Rome School. These are programs where families come together to learn. Everything is always more fun with friends for the children and the adults and the parents. And so some of those are informal. You know, I love biology, you love art, so we decided to meet up for science and art classes. But others are more formal. Our children do participate in Sankofa, whose co-founder, Monica Utsey, you'll hear from. We take classes ranging from Pan-African history to entrepreneurship. My middle daughter, who you did hear from, her love of creative writing was inspired by a class at City Kids taught by Dr. Stacey Cohen. My youngest daughter is at the Capitol Hill Learning Group, which is a Christian community of homeschoolers. They take art classes at the ARC through GW's Art Reach program, PE at the Washington Ballet, ice skating at Fort DuPont, soccer at Sports on the Hill, science and history at the Smithsonian, fine arts at the Kennedy Center, embassy tours, national book festivals, online art classes, Spanish classes, acting classes, Mandarin classes. There are so many great opportunities. That said, we've lost some great programs too, like Little Genius, a local STEM program that I think would have survived had there been additional program funding supports and resources for program space for homeschoolers in the area. I recently completed my first homeschool review, so I'll tell you about that. I love these times because homeschooling can definitely be a thankless job. I appreciate the generality in the regulations as it gives space for parents to present in a way that works best for them. We showcase their work in the subjects listed in the regulations. So I just created binders with work samples, tests, my administrative spreadsheets, and a video presentation. I provided you a sample link. While it may be helpful to provide examples of portfolios, it will be especially important to pay attention to privacy issues and to provide a range of examples and not just those with the bells and whistles, because bells and whistles are not required by law, and you do not want to give the impression that what is optional is actually required. My children have also taken standardized tests privately because I want them to become familiar with the format. I'm grateful that standardized testing, though, is not required, as honestly, the report was not very helpful as a homeschooler because there's very few details on exact concepts in which the students need improvement, but luckily there are definitely better resources available that give information on gaps in knowledge. So what can you do to support the homeschooling community? Continue programs like the Educator's Card and Kids Ride Free program, set aside funds for homeschool programs so they don't meet the fate like Little Genius. So show your support for those schools that are good community partners and allow homeschoolers to participate in their programs. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Beckerman. Consider ways to support homeschool honor societies and national programs that typically need a host institution. The work you've heard about special needs in high school programs. And lastly, you can continue to give us the space to do what we do best, which is curating individual educational experiences for our children, because each homeschool looks different for different families at different seasons. So keeping the broadness of our current regulations will continue to be a key way to support. So as I conclude, I just want to state the obvious that while there are clearly opportunities for improvement, we do live in the mecca of homeschooling with easy access to primary resources, experts, and world-renowned institutions, and a community of homeschoolers in every ward. I love homeschooling in DC. Plan to continue through high school, although every homeschooler will tell you we often reevaluate our decisions, sometimes monthly. So thank you, Dr. Reid and the rest of the board for checking on our community with a sincere interest in finding ways to continue your support. And I look forward to your questions and opportunities to work together in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Field Smith, you're up next.
Okay. Good evening. It is an honor to be here. I am Dr. Cheryl Field-Smith, an associate professor of elementary education at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. And I want you to know that, first of all, I am a former elementary school teacher. I taught first grade, second grade, fourth grade in public schools in Connecticut. I'm the mother of 2 children who are now adults, but they matriculated through public schools. I also, in my role at the University of Georgia, I teach teachers. I teach in-service and pre-service teachers. But UGA is also a Research One institution. And so as a tenured and tenure track faculty, we have to have research agendas. And my research agenda started out with Black family engagement. And along the way, I met an African-American woman who was homeschooling her children. And I didn't know that African-American families homeschooled. And so I was very curious. And after a 4-hour interview, she was very gracious with her time. I got excited because from my perspective, Black homeschooling today lines up with our history. The history that's usually taught in public schools would tell you otherwise, right? Supposedly African Americans pushed to integrate public schools. The reality is not all of us were on the same page with that. We're not a monolith. As your previous speaker told you, we are very diverse. And so some people didn't want to integrate those schools. And it's very tied to who we are as in our African culture and our African American culture. And so I got excited about it for those reasons. Tonight, I've chosen 3 major findings. I've been researching Black homeschooling since 2005. And I'm going to present 2 overview findings from the multiple studies that I've conducted. First finding that I want to share with you is that homeschooling serves as a refuge for Black children and youth. If you think about many of the things that happen in Black education today, particularly in urban areas, but really all over in a variety of settings, Black children in particular are prone to discipline disproportionality. You can think of the school to prison pipeline, and the data shows it starts as early as pre-K. You've heard tonight from people talking about bullying. The parents I talk to, they find in homeschooling a refuge from bullying. Sometimes they are finding a refuge in having their child placed in special education services. Just because a child is very active, it doesn't mean they have ADD, ADHD. But many times when you listen to the stories of African-American families who have placed their children in public schools, they have experienced the suggestion that their child needs special ed when they really don't. Parents also talk about low expectations, acceptance of underachievement or inferior work from their children. They know that their children can do more, and they want teachers that can push their kids and expect more from them. Also, the overemphasis placed on testing has driven some parents to homeschool. And I want you to know I do qualitative research, so I collect people's stories for a living. I have some samples. If I have time, I want to get to all the findings. Bell Hooks came up with a concept of home place, and she talked about home place historically when Black families were under the duress of Jim Crow. And homeschooling represents a reprioritizing of home place, really placing emphasis on positive cultural, racial self-identity, open access to gifted education. Once you homeschool, you can teach your child in a way that they're not allowed sometimes in public schools, to be child-centered, hands-on, that kind of learning. Finally, I want to tell you that home educators are very unique and diverse. Single parents, two-parent families, low-income families. Some parents have no college, some have professional degrees, all in between. Some are religious and some are secular. They're very, very different. And I submitted statements. You can read my closing remark there.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Dr. Matthews-Somerville.
Yes. Hello, DC State Board of Education, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Rochelle Matthews-Somerville, and I am CEO and president of EFM and also team leader of the Special Education Consultants at Homeschool Legal Defense Association and director of Classical Conversations. Over the last 25 years, I've served multiple capacities, including a university professor, K-12 teacher, regional specialist, and currently I'm a homeschool director and educational consultant working directly with homeschool families with and without special needs. So today I sit in front of the board with the dual capacity. First, as an educational advocate for those who choose to execute their freedom to educate their children at home. And secondly, as a homeschool mom of 6 with 1 homeschool graduate and 14 years of experience. So naturally, research has shown that children who are homeschooled can succeed academically, especially when provided with the appropriate support and resources. And this has been my experience both professionally and personally. Homeschool families are as diverse as the students that are served in any school system. And as you can imagine, many homeschool parents are driven to homeschool for various reasons, which can include a desire for more customized programming. It could be the dissatisfaction with current learning or unequal discipline policies, freedoms to cultivate natural gifts, or maybe even faith-based reasons. But regardless of those good intentions or reasons for homeschooling, there's certain processes, protocols, and regulations that create challenges, as well as some of those bright spots for homeschoolers. And so that's what brings me here today. So today I'm going to share with you kind of 3 issues, some of the challenges that homeschoolers potentially face when attempting to build those solid foundations at the home, some of the bright spots of homeschooling as our children thrive in our homes, and then some of the resources that just encourage some quality homeschooling environments. So as I previously noted, much of my professional career, I've also been homeschooling. I work tirelessly to help families understand how to navigate their homeschool journey and access resources. And professionally, I've seen firsthand the power of just investing in families by simply providing information, support, and guidance. When I actually began homeschooling 14 years ago, similar to a lot of DC residents, I too, under the portfolio, I reviewed under the portfolio option, which is only one of the options in the state of Maryland. And I've actually felt good about my homeschooling experience, but I found the review process to be incredibly unsettling. In my personal experience, just the ambiguity of the portfolio itself and limited guidance from what I perceived to be unqualified reviewers. And so in my situation, I had a public school, middle school principal who was using public school standards conduct a review of my early childhood homeschool portfolio, kind of an out-of-box portfolio using standards that I felt like he wasn't familiar with. And so this experience for me led me to kind of oversight options. So some other common challenges I think homeschoolers experience are when they're trying to participate in sporting activities at the public school system, accessing nationwide testing sites when trying to access SAT or ACT, some of that individualized guidance outside of homeschool reviews. And I'm not suggesting that more regulations need to be implementing. What I'm suggesting is that some of that support I received in some of the umbrella situations that I received in terms of my reviews, I receive year long, and it's not just during review time. But despite some of these challenges that I've expressed, the freedoms of homeschooling continue to be rewarding with many, many homeschoolers. Clearly the academic flexibility, parent choice of pace and approach, mastery learning, accommodations for special situations, the ability to focus on mental health, the prioritization of family values. These are just a few of the bright spots that come with executing the freedom to homeschool. Accessing information, specialists and qualified reviewers. And again, when I say qualified review teams, I'm referring to situations that are solely parents and professionals who are within the body of homeschoolers, as well as some of the funding opportunities that tend to be some of the most important sources of support that homeschooling families depend on through the schooling years. And just as research has shown that quality training and resources produce quality teachers, the same should be applied to homeschoolers. We have to commit to making some of those same crucial investments in homeschooling families, as we've heard with some of the other testimonies that we do in every educational entity, because I think it just benefits everybody and produces productive and confident young adults. And so while there is no perfect system, as rising bodies of research continue to support that graduates of home-based education are excelling, it's a stark indication that there's no additional regulations need to be put on homeschoolers. I think we're doing just fine. So I appreciate the opportunity to testify and share my experience, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Ms. Rodrigues.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you. My name is Keri Rodrigues. My most important job in life is being Matthew, Miles, and David's mama. And you will see David floating around behind me because life is life, and it's 7:20. So I appreciate your patience. I am also blessed to be the president of the National Parents Union, and we are a collective of 500 organizations in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. And we unite behind, we're a beautiful, vibrant tapestry of parents. We have parents of color, low-income parents, special needs parents, single mothers and fathers, grandparents, abuelitas, formerly incarcerated parents, parents who are in recovery, but parents who are traditionally not represented in traditional advocacy spaces. So we are just wonderful we're just so happy to be invited to be a part of this conversation this evening. First, I want to start with my own personal experience because, again, being a mother, I was, before the pandemic, a traditional public school parent. My kids went to the local elementary school, but we were all forced into this situation, this unprecedented moment where parents were witnessing in our living rooms the chronic systemic failure of our public education system. Many of our children were only getting real FaceTime with a teacher for an hour a day. And our kids were getting depressed, lonely, they were unstimulated. And what we saw across the country and what I saw in my own living room was just this desperation, like our kids looking at us saying, what can we do? How can you help me, Mom? I feel like my brain is turning into scrambled eggs. So as a mama, I'm not content to just say, oh, well, my goodness, we've got to give, the public system grace and just kind of let you sit on the couch and be a lump. We had to get into action. So me and mamas across the country started trying to figure out how we were going to layer on top of the offerings from the public school system through remote education to enhance the experience through a homeschooling opportunity. And we started having conversations collectively. And luckily, we were taken under the wing of the homeschooling community when we said, we don't even know where to begin. This is very confusing. And so throughout the country, parents came together to start sharing best practices. I'm very blessed in that, I was able to get some resources together and turn my living room into a classroom. We bought desks, we bought all kinds of art supplies, we put posters up on the wall and really tried to transform it into a classroom. But I was nervous as a parent and said, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how to do this. So again, the homeschool community was kind to parents like me and started sharing these best practices. But through that conversation, we also started to use our channels through the National Parents Union and host live programming so that we could provide support to other parents. We connected with Columbia University and the Teachers College so that we could get some expertise from actual teachers to show us the way and kind of guide us through the initial process. So while all of this was happening, we started to see different organizations start to offer some resources to parents to help facilitate this different programming. We saw the evolution of different culturally competent programs, the evolution of Khan Academy and the availability of that to many of our different homeschoolers. And through these conversations, we were able to connect with the VELA Education Fund, who offered us the opportunity to provide grants directly to parents who wanted to try to explore microschooling and homeschooling. So what we did as the National
Ms. Rodrigues, I apologize for interrupting. We are running short on time. So I'm going to go to the next person, and then we might be able to get more of your comments in the chat or through the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Ms. Monica Utsey, I think I heard you say, and apologies again for mispronouncing your name.
It's Utsey, Monica Utsey.
Utsey. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Hi again. My name is Monica Utsey. I have been homeschooling since 2003. I have 2 children. I have a son who's 20 years old, and I have 21, sorry. And I have a 15-year-old who I am still homeschooling. So my journey of homeschooling takes a lot of twists and turns. Initially, I did not plan to homeschool. I was a part of an organization, Mocha Moms, and we were all home with our children. We were doing things together, field trips and library, nature center. And during that time, I was searching for schools and I couldn't find a good fit for him. So in the meantime, I started to homeschool. And during that process, other moms were doing the same things, and we found ourselves running around to a lot of different places. And sometimes we weren't always there at the same time. And back during, back in the early 2000s, sometimes I would show up at an event and I would be the only, my child would be the only Black child there. And so we decided that we would join forces, and we created a listserv where we could coordinate with one another and, share our resources and meet up. So if we were planning to go to the nature center, someone would send out an email and we would all meet there together. Our children could have wonderful experiences with one another, and so could we. And so that is how the Sankofa homeschool community was born. And so from 2004 to 2011, that's largely how we operated. We shared resources, we supported one another, we coordinated field trips, classes. We just shared in that homeschool experience. And then in 2011, when we were all tired, we decided, you know what, let's pick a day where we all come together and we reach out to our community and we find resources and we find people who love what they do and want to share with our children. And so that is how the Sankofa Homeschool Collective was born and is still thriving and serving children since the pandemic globally now. Initially, it was in the DMV, and my son, as well as DeLise and a lot of other families in the district, are part of the Sankofa Homeschool Collective. And I want to jump quickly over to my oldest son, who is a lifelong musician, who studied West African drumming, who did a lot of amazing things throughout his homeschool career. He was very active at the Boys and Girls Club, and as he was about to graduate, he became the president of the oh gosh, I forgot the name of the name of the club, but he was the outgoing president. And because of his ties to music in the Washington area, he wanted to stay in this area for college. And he was a part of UDC's CARE program. He loved it. It was the first time that, he was taking, classes where he was being graded and, having to be accountable to a professor. And he thrived in the program. He was a 4.0 student, and by the time I graduated him from our homeschool, he had accumulated 12 college credits. He applied to UDC along with a lot of other universities, and he was accepted and offered the presidential scholarship with one condition, and that was take a GED test. He was in the community college, a straight A student, and applied to the university and told he had to take a GED test. It was a slap in the face to him and to our homeschool, and it made us feel like the homeschool diploma doesn't really mean anything in the District of Columbia. However, he was accepted at North Carolina A&T. He was accepted at Virginia State University, Temple University, University of Maryland. But here in the District of Columbia, where he wanted to attend school, he was not able to because UDC requires a straight A community college student to take a GED test, which doesn't make sense. So that is one of the things that I would really like to be addressed, because it wasn't addressed in the public comments, and it doesn't make any sense. And the story was so, we even reached out to the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and the story was so compelling that they ended up writing an article about him. They reached out to the university, and we just never got any resolution on that. And so I think it's sad when you have a homeschooler who has made, who's laid down his roots in DC and who wants to stay connected to his community and who wanted to attend the university and could not because he didn't take a GED test. Also,
I do apologize. We do need to move on to questions, but I'm sure that there will be an opportunity for you to continue in the question period as well. Members, we will be doing 2 rounds of 2 minutes. So please raise your hand and we will call you in order. Dr. Reid, you are first again.
I'm having a good time. Thank you all for, I only have 2 minutes. Okay, let's get to the questions. What are my questions? Are there accessibility models in the country for paying possibly parents and families to do homeschooling? And I raise that because Utsey had once did it for childcare for families to raise their own children as long as they met certain standards. The other piece is, what does technical assistance look like for your families? I probably should ask one question and then the second round, but anybody?
So I can jump in. There's a beautiful example in Oakland, California, with a group called the Oakland Reach and their hub system, where they are actually paying parents to do direct tutoring and homeschooling. They have a fantastic model that I would encourage all of you to take a look at. Lakeisha Young is the executive director, and I'm sure she would be willing to answer a lot of questions for you, but it's a beautiful example of this.
Thank you. Anyone for technical assistance? What does that look like from the city? I know they do monitoring, but the separate arm of that. Or just nothing? Ms. Bernard, I see you leaning in.
Yeah, I'll answer. I think that the best assistance I get is from fellow homeschool parents. I find that the institutions don't tend to want to recommend and give you specific examples and organizations and things people you should talk to, et cetera. And so, for a variety of reasons, liability, they don't know what's going on with the program, whatever. And so I find that the best assistance that I get is by finding, talking to friends, identifying people like Monica and the Covin family and some of the others that you've heard from, Stacey, that can tell us, how did you get there, and participating in programs like HSLDA has homeschool consultants, and I've used their high school consultant as we're heading to that, so I find that those have been the most helpful. Even when I ask in my homeschool review for specific, examples and how do I do the AP, how do I do these things? There's very little specifics that they want to give out.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
Yes, I want to thank Ms. Bernard and her entourage today for educating us. You couldn't have done a better job if you even tried.
Thank you.
That was fabulous. And Dr. Cheryl Fields Smith, you were talking about integration, and I just thought of something. The only reason that families integrated was because the schools that their children were going to were woefully under everythinged. And I know there's no such word as under everything, but that was the reason. It wasn't because they didn't want to have homeschooling. It was just because they didn't have a choice for that.
You mean when we initially, like Brown versus
Initially, I'm talking about.
Have you ever read Dr. Vanessa Siddle Walker's work? She actually shows you the opposite. The school, that's what I mean. Like the narrative that we are taught in public school is that segregated Black schools were inferior. The reality is those were schools of excellence. Look up Dr. Vanessa Siddle Walker, Emory University.
No, I'm just saying the only reason, because when I'm from Norfolk, and I'll use my time. Anyway, I'm from Norfolk, so they integrated the schools in Norfolk in 1958 or 1959. And the students didn't want to go to the white schools at all. The parents didn't want them going to the white schools.
Right.
But the only choices they had was either go to those schools or stay in schools, because there wasn't a homeschool movement.
Right.
stay in those schools where they were woefully under everything. That's all I'm saying. I wasn't.
Yeah, and I was only saying that I used that connection to show that during that time, you also had Black families going to Catholic schools. You had Black families doing all kinds of things. They were fighting to keep their Black schools open. They didn't want to desegregate it. Across the country, different things happened. And it's the same thing with the homeschool movement. You can see the same thing. And if you look at just that scenario and think, well, wow, why would Black people want to take their kids out of public schools today when they work so hard to get into them? That's a false narrative there.
Oh, definitely.
That's what I was saying.
No, that's fine. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang.
Thank you. So a couple of you mentioned, and we heard this from the previous testimonies, recommending us not to change any of the DC standards around this. And I just wanted to see if folks who know this, if you'd be willing to raise your hand if you agree with that, that the current standards as they are in DC are as they should be, or guidelines. And I'm going to pick on you then, Ms. Bernard, since you put a thumbs up. Why is that?
I think that they're broad and they are general enough to allow people to do what they have been doing. I think that there are opportunities for other ways to support special education, special needs, the dual enrollment program, some of those little intricacies, but the general specifics in the regulations that say the subjects and, that you have a review and, when OSCE determines it, I think the broadness of that works for me.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening. I am curious. I can appreciate all of the stellar examples of how homeschool works. I am curious though too if there are accessibility challenges for some families. So if maybe your public school is not serving you well and you're having similar challenges to what Ms. Rodrigues faced, but you work 2 jobs, like homeschooling might not be an option for you, or there could be other circumstances where people can't take advantage of the full breadth of what homeschooling could be. And so I am curious if there are any supports or offerings that matter from an equity standpoint of just people being able to fully educate their kids, no matter what option they choose, that we should be thinking about.
So I can speak from, again, a national standpoint. We have seen tremendous examples where we have had homeschool collaboratives, where it's much similar to the style of a micro school, where maybe like for instance, in my example, we had three families, 6 kids in total, 4 children who were on IEPs. And we actually pooled together so that we could hire a special ed paraprofessional to ensure that, whatever accessibility issues that we were facing, that we would have a professional on site. What I would like to see is better coordination and support from our education system to encourage that if parents feel like that is the right decision, the right educational environment for their child. Right now, it feels very adversarial. If a parent says, what's happening in the classroom is distracting, or there's bullying, or there's racism, or it's just not working for my kid and they want to choose this option, it almost seems like they're being robbed of their own self-determination to make that choice and being dissuaded from it. So what I think a lot of parents, what I see, would like to see better coordination and support from the state, so that if there is an opportunity where they think that this is the right fit for their child, that they can reach out, and it's more of a friendly support and an encouragement if this is the right environment for their child.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for your testimony. Ms. Bernard, I wanted to start with you. You mentioned one thing the board could do is support schools and sort of shout them out who are good partners to homeschool families. what does it mean for a school to be a good partner to a homeschool family?
Well, thank you, my representative. I think that, one of the things that happened with Sankofa is we were needing space, so I think a school could provide space, to homeschool, to homeschoolers. I think that, my son wants to do Model UN, and, sometimes it's hard to get together a Model UN group, or, all these things we have to do ourselves. I have to call Monica, we get together and we call each other and we say, do you want to do this? Who's got time to put this together? But there are Model UN programs, debate programs that there is a school that agreed to let my son participate in. So I think those types of things, music, Duke Ellington, I have a young daughter who's an actress in New York, signed actress, but I have to drive her to far Northwest in order for her to participate in a program. I could do a program at Duke Ellington or one of the specialty schools where she could do something locally that's not as far. That would be great. So I think a school that opens up its resources, not all of them, obviously, can provide all kinds of things around safety, security, whatever. There's all kinds of things to think about with regard to privacy. But I think that, a school that can open up its resources, whether they be space or programs, and allow homeschoolers, particularly even just for the electives. And obviously people talk about sports as well. My son does do the recs and the AAUs and the PGA juniors and those things. It would be nice to be able to meet some friends in the neighborhood that go to the school across the street, and be able to do some things with them at their school and not just have to wait for Sports on the Hills programs.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Dr. Matthews-Somerville, I'm going to tee up a question for you that we might have to get to in the next round. And it's about access to special ed services and what that looks like in other places you work with as part of the Defense Fund.
Absolutely. Every state is a little bit different, but in some places, the school system will allow for services to be provided to schools, but it's different from district to district.
Okay, I'm going to stop because my time's going to get called. And I don't want to interrupt you. But if you've got more thoughts or resources for us, if you don't mind dropping them in the chat, we'd love to read up on them. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. This is so interesting and helpful. I guess I have several questions, but I am going to zero in on assessment. And I guess I'm just curious to know, I'm getting a sense of like that these general guidelines are helpful and that you put together a portfolio. I guess I'm just wondering if you find that sufficient to truly assess your student, if there would be tools or ways that the system could be more helpful in that arena. I'd be interested to know that. And anybody can answer. I see you nodding your head, Ms. Bernard. Why don't you start?
I actually defer to Monica. My children are young, and like I said in my testimony, we didn't need to do a ton of assessments. We teach to mastery, so I know exactly what their weakness is. We did subtracting zeros for a month, but pre-algebra was fine, and so I know what's going on. Those reports didn't really give me much information, but I think that as they get older, that there could be some supports for the PSAT, to prep for PSAT, to prep for SAT, to do some of those types of things. So I would defer to Monica, who has an older child.
If you want to answer.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was putting something in the chat. I apologize.
Just wondering if there are assessment tools or services or guidelines that would be helpful, or if you feel like the way that it is done now with just sort of the portfolio is sufficient for you to be able to do what you need to do to know if your students where they should be.
Yeah, I think that as DeLise said, typically homeschoolers teach to mastery. Like we don't teach to averageness, like a C, and then you go to the next. If the child isn't mastering the material, you work on it until the child masters the material. I believe homeschoolers can participate in standardized testing if they choose to do so. I just don't think that should be a requirement because, every student, that isn't not the best way to evaluate every student. And in terms of accessibility for learning differences. I think that's a huge problem. I had two very different learners. My older son was a very traditional learner. My younger son was not. And I had him assessed through Linda Move Bell and wanted to participate in the program, but at $26,000, it was cost prohibitive. There's a school in my neighborhood that offered the program after school, and of course, my son couldn't participate. So homeschoolers having access to special programs like that would be wonderful, because, you know, I could have walked him over there a couple days a week for him to have access to a $26,000 program that I couldn't afford. And so what do you do in that case? Well, you do what homeschoolers always do. We do it ourselves. So I had to educate myself. I had to read books about dyslexia and learning differences, right brain learning, all of that. And I ended up doing the work myself for my son. So I think that.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I am out of time for this, for Dr. Gasoi. Ms. Wattenberg.
Yeah, so I had technical difficulties and dropped out for 5 minutes, so I may have missed the answer to this, but I do see in the chat, there's this question, Ms. Utsey is saying traditional homeschooling and homeschool pods are not the same. And that actually kind of formulates a question that I had. How would you talk about that difference? And I'll give it to Ms. Utsey since she did the chat, but if there's time, I'm interested in others as well.
Well, my understanding of a learning pod is families that are coming together and, working in smaller groups with a curriculum from the school system. Whereas homeschooling is very different for every family. It's like a tailor-made suit. Every situation is going to be different in terms of, like, for example, in my homeschool, I have one child who's a traditional learner and one who is not. And so a standardized curriculum wouldn't work in that situation. And I think that, after the pandemic, any kind of learning at home has been thrown into a homeschool bowl, and it's just not the case. K-12 is not necessarily homeschooling. It's online instruction at home. Homeschooling, in the traditional sense, from what I understand, is the parent taking the responsibility to create a learning experience that meets the need of each individual child.
And I take it, well, I'll pass, never mind.
Thank you. President Parker.
Thank you all for sharing. I want to pick up on the thread of special education services for students who are being homeschooled. And this is open to anyone, but maybe Ms. Rodrigues, we'll start with you from a national perspective. Are there any examples of resources and or a level of coordination where students are being serviced or provided those interventions even while being homeschooled?
And you're speaking in the special ed context?
Yes, yes.
So what we have seen primarily is districts that have provided additional resources or additional online availability, which was far from sufficient. So I think that remains an incredible challenge, how to, like, the traditional pullouts you would see, or the other special services that you would see baked into an IEP. We've really watched districts, if we're talking about remote and virtual learning, struggle with that. In terms of
to what extent the legal aspects influence the lack of services provided to students in homeschooling environments.
So homeschool students are entitled to the same protections and same services that a child attending a traditional district school or a charter school would be provided. So there, what I've seen, and I don't want to speak to this, specifically in this context of DC, because I've seen it in different different context of how states have provided this. But again, I would point to the state of California, which has a collaborative where homeschoolers actually have come together to be able to access that level of support. It's not your traditional pullout, but again, more akin to being able to go to a service center or to participate with a service provider. But those are actually provided for resources from the state outside.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we're now in round 2. If you have questions for round 2, please do use the raise your hand feature, and we can begin with Dr. Sutter this time.
I'm coming right back to Dr. Matthews-Somerville to learn more about special education.
Okay, yes.
So I am curious, just you mentioned it changes from district to district, but that means that it would be aligned with IDEA for
Yes.
homeschool families to be provided with special ed services and or related services.
Yes. So yes, I can't speak to specifically each state because each state has, it's based on resources, I believe, but you know, again, every state is different and it's based on district to district. It's not consistent within a state. And so I think the districts create their own based on their resources.
Got it. Okay, so that's helpful. Just to make clear my thinking, it's helpful because it feels like a place where the state board might have some additional questions for OSSI and some additional opportunities to advocate on behalf of families who've spoken out about this. My other question, and this is really for anyone, is about this question of access to dual enrollment. You talked a lot, each of you, about access to programs that happen at economies of scale in a way that is harder for an individual family to replicate on their own. So I'd love to talk more about this dual enrollment piece. We've heard some particular challenges in DC, and it sounds like Ms. Utsey, you actually had a positive experience with it up to a point, at which point it became problematic. Was there any justification given for the need to take a GED / how do you decide how a student graduates from homeschool?
Well, as one who has graduated a homeschooler, DC has requirements for what a student needs to take in terms of English, math, science, you know, the traditional ways that any child graduates from high school. And those things were completed. And some of them were completed at the community college level. He took English Composition 1, English Composition 2, A's in both classes. He took Intro to Psychology. He took Intro to Political Science, and he received A's in all of those classes. And so to then be asked to take a GED was redundant. It didn't make any sense at all. And like I said, we reached out to Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They thought that perhaps this requirement was related to being able to receive federal funding, the Pell Grant. No, it did not impact it because homeschoolers go to other colleges and use federal funds all the time. So there was no reason, there was no response to the letter that was sent from HSLDA, nothing. And so at that point, you know, we just decided that wasn't a good place for my son, and it was not a place that was friendly to homeschoolers.
Thank you very much.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I really appreciated the analogy shared about homeschool being like a tailor-made suit. I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the desire for flexibility and for fit. I am curious how that desire can also be coupled with almost like a like something that ensures there's a solid foundation for all. Like that's a thing too, right? And like some kids might not get that. So how are there things that are in place to make sure like kids don't fall through the cracks, or that we're making sure kids get a solid foundation? And that question can go to anyone, because I think both of those things are good.
If I hear you correctly, I think that the reviews and the reviews, while they're random in terms of when you get them, there are specifics about the subjects, not necessarily what you need to cover in the subjects, but that there are 7, 8 subjects that you have to show, written work in, or video or a picture, some showing some work in these particular areas. So, I think that, in the way that the system's set up right now, the reviews is the way that they're ensuring a student isn't falling through. Now, how often they do that, and if you don't, you cannot pass for whatever the language terminology is, and then they will follow up with you, and you have to do this. I'm going to call it remediation. I'm sure there's a better word that they're using. Where you come back to them and show. So it's not oh, you had a bad review and you get a C and you're out, but you have to then come back and show those areas again and again, and show written work or like I said, pictures or some examples or samples of your work. So right now that's the way in Maryland. I homeschooled in Maryland for 7 years. It's the same thing. We got reviews. We did our reviews with with a different person every time. Now in DC, it's only a few people, and I was in Prince George's County. I had a different person every single time that did my review, and it was the same thing. There were certain subjects, you gave them a portfolio.
I get a little bit of bonus time thanks to Representative Chang. I want to use it to follow up on something Ms. Matthews said earlier. So she mentioned that the person who was doing her review was not well suited to her, literally the instructions she was given at the time. And that's a concern for me, right? I want to let you kind of speak to that a little bit more. And I'm just,
yeah. I think that's.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was to Ms. Matthews.
Oh, sorry.
No, what I was going to suggest is, I said one way to strengthen the reviews is to look at your review team. If you incorporate homeschoolers as a part of your review team, I think you have a better chance of reviewing, because homeschoolers know that kind of out of box kind of things that they're looking at. I feel like when you take an outsider and they don't quite know what homeschoolers are, how out of the box we can be, sometimes they're holding us to standards that don't make sense if you're not a homeschooler. And so I think by using homeschoolers as a part of the team, I think you incorporate that kind of thing. Or as another option is to have other options. So you have a portfolio, like in the state of Maryland, we have portfolios and we have umbrellas. So an umbrella serves the same purpose as a portfolio. So maybe to revisit the idea of an umbrella. An umbrella does the same thing. You have to get an approved umbrella. So umbrellas have to be standardized just like a portfolio, except for it involves, your homeschool team, and that's the people who represent their approved team, and they understand what they're looking at. And that's kind of your mentor group who will take you through the process of understanding the different stages.
So we don't have umbrellas in DC. With my last 30 seconds, what's an umbrella?
An umbrella group is almost like your portfolio team, except for they are approved. A lot of times they come under church approved umbrellas. And they're similar to a portfolio team. They're a group of reviewers that are approved. In Maryland, they're approved by the state.
Thank you. Thank you,
Sure.
Representative Chang, for the bonus time.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
I don't know if you know, but I've been teaching for 50 years in public schools, and I am so impressed with everything that we've heard tonight. And I'm really depressed by what I heard about my university, the District of Columbia, about the CARES Act for 2 parents who were talking about their fabulous students not being able to go to UDC because of having to take a GED. And so I'm going to use everything I can to get that changed as quick as I can. But one thing that we need to make sure that gets done, and it's up to y'all to do it as community members and also as the experts on homeschooling, is people need to be, I wrote a question out, what about parents who don't hear what you are all talking about? Parents that would like to homeschool their children but don't have the facilities to do it, or parents don't know that homeschooling works. So it's really it's not up to us to get that. We'll try to get the information out, but it's up to get it broadcast about the very impressive things that are being done in homeschooling. And the last thing is, and we've talked about this over and over again, about homeschoolers receiving the same services. I know that homeschoolers in DC do not receive the same services as public schools, charter schools, and private schools. And so that's something that needs to be broadcast even more strongly. I'm not asking y'all to, I saw you a couple people nodding, so that was your answers to that. But I really just appreciate this fabulous testimony, and I want to thank everyone on the board that put this together, because this is really important. And as President Parker mentioned, the homeschoolers last year, there were twice as many homeschoolers as there were the year before last. And I'm sure that will happen again this year because all the schools are not going to open 100%.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you. I forgot that I wanted to, first of all, thank Dr. Fields-Smith for your context. I think it was really interesting and obviously very important to think about. It's not something I had thought about before. So I just wanted to really applaud you for bringing that into our conversation. It's really valuable. And I guess I may have misunderstood something, so I may not have a question, but this is to Ms. Matthews-Somerville. You mentioned that you wish that you receive the same level of supports all year round as you do during the review period. And I just wanted to hear more about that.
Sure. So I actually receive it now, but I receive it through the umbrella. So originally when I was doing a portfolio, we were only reviewed at the end of the year. So let me preface this also with saying the review that I was seeking did not come from outsiders. So through an umbrella, I am now reviewed by homeschoolers. So my umbrella group is a reviewer of homeschoolers who track us kind of throughout the year. They are part of our co-ops. And so they are also part of our review team. And so when we need to talk about the transition from elementary to middle school, we have somebody to talk about, we have supports. They are there as co-op teachers where we're trading off when it's time to talk about doing transcripts, when it's time to talk about dual enrollment. So the homeschoolers in the umbrella group are also the homeschoolers that are our reviewer, that are also the homeschoolers that are in our co-op classes with our kids. And so they're our peers and they're also mentors. And so we kind of trade off trading supports and all the way through. So it's not just we see them once a year just for the portfolios and the reviews. That's what I meant by the type of support.
That's super helpful. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Thank you very much. President Parker, I'll turn to you to close out.
Thank you. I want to follow this thread of support. As Representative O'Leary was saying, the numbers in DC have more than doubled in the last year and a half. And I'm thinking about those families that would have started homeschooling during a pandemic and the supports and infrastructure that is needed to do this successfully. And again, I just want to know, like, what models are there out there around, like, whether it's grants or programming or supports that, whether it be financial, whether it's coaching, whether it's professional development, can support families to kind of build the apparatus they need to successfully support students at homeschooling. I'm going to open it up to everyone, but I would ask that you limit your response to 10 to 15 seconds so everyone can get in if possible.
I'll just say that Monica and I are both homeschool consultants. I know there's a couple others. So it's really one-on-one in that sense, where we've helped support those who are thrust into schooling from home and those who are coming in.
And that support is, I'm assuming, funded by families, but there isn't like a governmental apparatus or grant program. Got it. That seems like that should be an easy solution for an OSSI, for example, to provide to families, I would think. Any others? Thank you for that.
I believe the National Parents Union, our grant program was one of very few grant programs where we offered, again, 50 brand new homeschool families the opportunity to begin this journey. So again, you know, I think I would again point and encourage all of you to look at the Oakland Reach and their coordination with the Oakland Public School District and the support that they're now receiving, so that homeschool parents, traditional district school parents, there's support, you know, that is provided in a coordinated effort there. And I would encourage you to look at that model.
Thank you. That is our time. I really appreciated this conversation. And I would just say, it is my belief that as a district, we have responsibilities for all students, whether they are schooled within our public school system or at home due to a parent's and family's choice. So I think you are giving us a lot of food for thought, and we hope to keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us tonight. Members, thank you for such a thoughtful and rich conversation. We are going to go ahead. I will say just a moment of transparency as we transition. I always find after those types of panel discussion, a desire to have like a debrief, but I know that is not on the agenda, but just sharing that maybe in new business that can come up. We are now going to turn to our Student Advisory Committee report. We will hear from student representatives Alex O'Sullivan, Shayla Dill, and members of the Student Advisory Committee who will present their end of year report. The Student Advisory Committee is a group of DCPS and public charter school high school students that meets monthly to discuss issues pertaining to education within and outside of their respective schools, and advises the state board based on the experiences of students in their group and across the city. This culminating Student Advisory Committee report includes issues like mental health, safe passage, and distance learning, and Student Advisory Committee members have addressed throughout addressed throughout the past school year. They have also compiled their suggestions and recommendations to help improve students' experience at their school and the quality of education in the District of Columbia. So before I turn it over to Representative O'Sullivan and Representative Dill and the members of our Student Advisory Committee, I just am also hearing Representative O'Sullivan's voice in the back of my head around how we often ask and amplify student voice, but not always act on their suggestions. And so I am leading tonight with an active listening ear, and Representative O'Sullivan and Dale, I hope you keep us honest to acting on the recommendations that you provide us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Awesome.
President Parker. Before I share my screen, we've created like a PowerPoint presentation to go through each section with you guys. Just wanted to quickly introduce everyone, and they can say their name, their school, what grade they'll be in the fall. So I'll start. My name is Alex, as you all know. I'm a rising senior at Basis DC, and I'll pass it to Gary.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Murray. I attend Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School, and I'm a rising senior. I will pass it over to Reagan.
Thank you. My name is Reagan Alvin. I will be a rising senior at Wilson High School, and I will pass it to Emily.
Good evening. My name is Emily Padilla, and I am a rising junior at Calvin Coolidge Senior High School. I'll pass it to Leah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leah Snow, and I am a rising junior, and I attend KBC College Preparatory. I think that's everyone on the meeting.
Yep. Shayla unfortunately couldn't be here with us, but you know, this was a culmination of efforts from Student Advisory Committee members and all the work we've done this past year. So now I will share my screen, and you all have the report. It's been shared with you. Can you guys see the screen? Okay. All right. So here's just the outline of what we'll be discussing in the meeting. So distance learning, student mental health, in-person learning, safe passage, inequities in funding, then finally student voice from the state board. We're going to split it up so that different students are going to tackle different topics, and some topics may have more written on the screen than others. There are going to be key recommendations and takeaways written on the screen, but the students will be presenting will be sharing their own personal experience. So look at the screen, but also listen to what our fabulous students are saying. So first, we have distance learning. So will our first student like to take it away?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Sloan, and I am a rising junior who attends Kit BC College Preparatory. And tonight I will be speaking about distance learning in the pandemic and how it has impacted students across the district. Being a part of many support groups the past year and hearing and learning and taking action on how virtual learning has impacted me and my peers, the main takeaways I have learned and have witnessed are how students have struggled due to the lack of computer assistance provided by schools across the district. Gary Murray, who has also dealt with technical difficulties in the pandemic for about the first 6 months of the pandemic, he says, I had a 2010 model computer with a 2010 software. They eventually gave me a newer piece of technology, but they did not have enough for everyone. It was only if your computer was not usable that they would give you another. And some students did not have the willingness to say my computer doesn't work because they know their schools are short. And if we had proper funding from the beginning, the technology would have been better. And so many problems with this learning could have been avoided, says Gary Murray, a rising senior at Dunbar High School. Also from Haven Gilchrist, only having a class from August to January was terrible because then you would have to take the exam on that course material in May when you haven't had a refresher or class review of that content. Everything was rushed, and I was not ready for those 4x4 exams. Haven Gilchrist, rising senior at Wilson High School, says, being the student government president, but one of my main takeaways were many of my peers were struggling. Taking action, I advocated through speeches, speak truth sessions, along with any other club I was a part of. Many of my peers have had trouble with learning and completing assigned work for numerous technical reasons because of the lack of resources provided by schools all over the district. The school schedule is also another thing that has extremely impacted us students, and that has allowed us to fall behind with many assignments interfering with students' personal life. Everyone has their responsibilities and story from learning virtually this past school year. Another thing that I've recognized that has impacted many students from the past school year is exams and testing. It has been extremely difficult to adjust to learning from home and understanding all the new material provided. Switching back into the school building would likely be hard for most and easier for many. I created a survey with the SGA before the school year let out. Lots of students explained how switching gears from at home and onto the building in a pandemic is going to be a challenge mentally and something that won't be easy to adjust back to. While many others are ready to return to school, although taking COVID-19 precautions will also be a distraction to many. With distance learning becoming the norm for most schools across the district, last year it forced many students to adjust and impact into many home situations. We now have to shift back to in-person learning. Distance learning has left many of us concerned, as data shows from my school specifically, and I'm sure many others. We missed out on learning with the hands-on experience, and now we are to adjust to learning in person again while still being in the pandemic. I hope that the school boards are largely taking into consideration everything that's in sight for students to adjust this upcoming school year for distance learning. Thank you.
Okay.
You can breathe now.
And now we will go to our next person, which I believe is Emily.
Good evening. My name is Emily Padilla, rising junior at Calvin Coolidge Senior High School. Tonight, I'll be presenting the mental health portion of our report. Within our discussions in the meetings, I have heard that many students are not participating as much, not engaging in class conversations as much as they used to. They're simply just not doing the work because they feel lonely and are sometimes going through personal things. There are many other causes. Sorry. Sorry. There are many other causes due to school, such as a heightened anxiety, technology troubles, and excessive workload for this past school year. I believe that student mental health is largely overlooked and treatments are not widely marketed within our district. I had no idea that my school offered therapists until one day I had a nervous breakdown in my morning class. And I know that I would not have been in that situation if I had known that there was someone, a professional that I can talk to about the things that I was going through. And there may be other students dealing with other serious mental wellness issues, but how will they get the help they need if they don't know about them? On the bright side, there are some tools that we recognize that schools and some other teachers implemented that alleviated some stress we were having. So they created more asynchronous classes. They had discussion events, in-person events involving physical exercise, and optional extracurricular activities, emphasizing the extracurricular and fun activities because those were great ways that students got to alleviate a lot of stress. Here are some examples of things that students experienced that their schools offered. A student at Washington Latin started a petition for mental health days, which turned into Wellness Wednesdays. They did things such as Lego building, outdoor escape room, how to not procrastinate, and a mini golf. Kayla Park, a rising junior at Washington Latin, participated in those, and they allowed her to socialize with her peers and see more people, which she missed a lot. And it also gave her a nice break that she thoroughly enjoyed. Leah Sloan, a rising junior at KIPP DC College Preparatory, says, "My school does Zoom meetings and optional surveys daily for students as a way of checking in with them. This began after I presented to the staff at school about how they can support students. I feel like they can improve mental health support by enforcing trusted adults and create support groups. We have learned so much during this pandemic, and it's important that mental health next school year is not ignored because, as we can see, it can drastically change the way that someone learns." Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I just wanted to add one last thing before we move on to our next section about distance learning and mental health. We wrote it down, the recommendations in the report, but Wellness Wednesdays was something that people really appreciate, or I don't know if DCPS calls it that, but those days off that DCPS gave students really appreciated. And it's going to be talked about in the coming slides, but students thought that it was one of the best parts of distance learning these past year. So now I'm going to pass it off to Reagan and Gary. I'm not sure which one of you is going first, but I would like to say it's Gary's birthday today. So happy birthday to Gary. So you two can take it away.
All righty, I believe I'll be going first. Thank you, Alex. Again, my name is Gary Murray. Good evening, everybody. I will be starting us off for in-person reopening. In order to ensure safety and security for students and staff, as we re-enter physical schools, many students agree that vaccination for those eligible is key. In addition, providing masks and other sanitary supplies in the building, as well as stocking up on basic items like soap, will prevent the spread of disease within school buildings. However, even with these in place, some argue that some students will still feel the need to stay at home. Possible options for hybrid and virtual learning should be considered. While the exclusion of asynchronous Wednesdays has been confirmed for the next year, as we've heard, many students still believe that there should be days dedicated to deep cleaning the building more often. The younger DCPS students may have less of a platform from which they can advocate, so feedback from those groups should be collected often. Reagan.
All right, thank you very much. Can we go to the next slide? My name is Reagan Alvin, and today I'll be piggybacking off of Gary's point regarding in-person learning. As we return to school, it is truly critical to ensure the safety and wellness of DCPS students and staff amidst this new norm of optimistic uncertainty. Adaptations as a result of the pandemic have shown what should be left behind and what should be utilized in the new in-person school setting. For instance, the academic and mental tolls of constantly learning from screens can be seen clear as day upon looking at the steep dip in grades from the past year and a half. Educators should be encouraged to take a more unplugged, one-on-one approach to learning. However, what we can take away from the virtual learning period is that education has become, in some ways, more accessible. With the ability to notify students of assignments and syllabus materials on an online platform, keeping track of academic progress has become easier than ever. This, along with the ability to turn in assignments from the convenience of one's phone, gives students the capability to catch up after missing school. Even as we transition back to pens and paper, these innovations should not be ignored. With that said, it should also be stressed that there should be a backup plan if students and staff should be put at risk again. Thankfully, if we do manage to streamline this transition, we should be set. Please feel free to read the quotes on screen and screenshot if you would like. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Next, we're gonna move to Safe Passage, and our one of our students who's going to come present today, Kayla Park. You heard a quote from her earlier today. rising senior, I believe, at Washington Latin. She couldn't be here, but Reagan is going to read what she prepared.
Thank you, Alex. As Alex stated, the following statement is provided by Student Advisory Council member Kayla Part. She's worked tirelessly on this initiative, but unfortunately circumstances have prevented her of being able to speak with you all today, so I will be presenting on her behalf. The health and safety of students, not only in school, but during their commutes, is extremely important to us. Many students have expressed concerns of contracting COVID on public buses in the metro, which are places germs can spread very rapidly. Students would feel more comfortable with hand sanitizer and other protective equipment in each car and around the metro. The SAC also recommends that the state board collaborates with the mayor's office, OSSI, or WMATA to release a statement on how they plan to keep students safe. The last thing that we want is for there to be another COVID breakout and for us to have to quarantine once again. Students are also concerned about violence and sexual harassment on public transportation. Many DC students have to face this issue every single day, and it's important that we do better to make our city safer. We ask you to raise awareness, ask for student input, work closely with DC student advocates and the DC City Council on this issue, and to request more funds to implement solutions. And as always, please feel free to screenshot and read the quotes if you would like. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Reagan. And just so you guys, just so everyone knows, we are appreciative the state board in our last working session did bring up this issue and is looking for ways to address it. But this is just such an important issue that we want the state board to continue to address moving forward. And now Reagan and Gary are going to split this side about inequities in funding, which is a very important one.
Thank you, Alex. I'm gonna start first. Teachers in Wards 6 and 8 are having to provide themselves and their students with the materials they need to better their education. Let me say that one more time, because I've talked to many teachers over the past 2 weeks just about this one topic. Teachers in Wards 6 through 8 are having to provide themselves and their students with the materials they need to better their education. Basic materials such as pencils, pens, paper, up-to-date laptops and software, as we heard, textbooks, etc., are not being provided by the district. This puts students and teachers in those regions to a disadvantage. Lacking in these areas greatly affects the learning of students put through DCPS. Many teachers I have talked to with across the district agree with the simple statement, quote, "You don't practice what you preach across the board," end quote. That's concerning for future learners in DC. Learning, no matter what grade you are in, takes for you to have all the support you need, and you need to take advantage of the full education system. Students should not be left with having to provide for themselves for their own education. Teachers should not have to pay out of pocket to provide their students with the full learning experience they deserve. Schools in disproportionately funded areas are also downsizing programs in their art and music departments. Students are now having to face lacking perspectives and experiences that art and music brings to a school's learning environment. Downsizing these programs also closes opportunities for students who thrive in these areas. Reagan.
Thank you, Gary. I would like to follow up on his statement, honing in on a more specific issue, which is the position of the librarian. As a result of a 2020 policy change, the position of the librarian has been changed from L1, which is required, to L2, which is flexible with position. This turns the necessary resource of a librarian into an interchangeable asset. A majority of librarians either being laid off or switched to part-time are from schools east of the river in Wards 7 and 8. Librarians are a guiding force for student knowledge, as well as school culture, typically being sponsors for several extracurricular activities. Librarians are linked to higher test scores and literacy rates, two of the areas in which DC is so far behind compared to other regions of the United States. While this is already a pressing issue for principals of more funded schools, many schools with lesser funding have to choose between losing their librarian or losing a teacher who is already teaching 30 or more students. Suddenly, for some schools, encouraging literacy and community is a privilege and not a right. As one witnesses this never-ending cycle of budget cuts causing more and more strain in schools in majority BIPOC regions of the district, one of the many reasons for DC having one of the widest accessibility gaps becomes clear. It's DCPS's habit of eliminating essential resources in the name of cutting costs. We urgently recommend that as we enter this new year and forward, DCPS funding stands by its claim of promoting equity and excellence and to ensure that every DC school can reap the benefits of having a librarian. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Reagan and Gary. And now finally, we're going to move on to our last slide before we open the panel up for questions from each of you guys. And this is something we've talked about in the past couple of meetings regarding student voice. And it's been a part of an ongoing process that the state board's been working on with the Student Advisory Committee in terms of recruiting applicants for the Student Representative and Student Advisory Committee position. So in the report, we pretty much lay all of this out, but one of the most fundamental parts of accurately labeling what we do, the Student Advisory Committee, is the proper messaging that uses the right words to describe what the atmosphere is like. We as Student Advisory Committee members describe in a few words what their experience has been like in the Student Advisory Committee and why it may be appealing. So on the screen, you can see here some of the different adjectives students use. Inclusive, empowering, uplifting, and we just wanted students, when they're seeing the application, to understand this is a group to better the education community. We wanted to make sure the board can emphasize the influence the committee has with the backing of the state board, the fact that this is the only publicly elected education body in the city, and we want to do more with the Student Advisory Committee so that we can do more on our recommendations and make our students more engaged and have more influence. And we also want to make it known that Student Advisory Committee members get to gain a better understanding of the education system. And they'll be interacting with state board members. Each of you have probably come to a Student Advisory Committee meeting at least once or twice. And also finally, mentioning how community service hours are available. While it may be something that, isn't necessarily the reason all people join. And I think usually the members who tend to have the best experiences tend to do it beyond sort of the reason of what you can gain out of it in terms of community service hours, but some of the enriching aspects of it too, in terms of what you are gaining intellectually. But this is something that should be highlighted because, it is a barrier to some students upon graduation, and it is something that can be stressful. So this is something that should be highlighted. Finally, we want to advertise the Student Advisory Committee application and the work the committee does much more. This year, of course, we were able to do the distance learning town halls, which were on YouTube and were available to the public to come and witness. But of course, that was only the beginning of what we want the Student Advisory Committee to do going forward. So on the right, I think you may see something about maybe like creating a public Student Advisory Committee meeting. And that's something that I believe Gary may have suggested in one of our committee meetings, but it is something that should be considered. I think parents, students, high school leaders, education officials, they want to see what we do. And it would be a great way to sort of get some more shine on the work of the great students. And obviously, we want there to be a concerted effort to improve outreach to students in Ward 7 and 8, because as Reagan said, inequities in funding disproportionately affect those neighborhoods and those schools. So on the right here, you'll see all these different suggestions, and some of which have already sort of gone into work, such as the promotions for the SAC, using the state board's Instagram to promote the work that we do. We do have something that's maybe more featured towards the staffers, but in terms of the new state board website, we would really appreciate it if there could be a way for students to join the committee by perhaps putting their email somewhere on the website, and it would send an email to one of the student representatives notifying them that there is someone who'd like to join the committee. Because a number of students said that they found out about the Student Advisory Committee by going to the state board's website. So it is something that students that students can use, and may make things easier as well throughout the school year, not just during the application period. And then also things like, and all of you all know this, but sending the application to your school leader and telling them just to do 3 simple things of posting on their website, newsletter, and social media. Those are the 3 most common ways students find out about things. It's usually from their school somehow, Oftentimes, if a student gets an email from the school, they'll read it, but also people sometimes go to their own school's website. So it would be cool if you have a good relationship with the principal to tell them to do that, because the more representation we can get, the better. Last but certainly not least, you'll see at the bottom for 3 student advisory committee events. The idea is that we could do these things throughout the year, not just like a summer thing or not something just between now and the start of the next school year, but really things that could be going forward, like a staple of what the student advisory committee does. So the first thing is like award specific, get to know your SBOE rep event, and we could have student advisory committee members there. But I'm sure any number of the student advisory committee members here could tell you that they probably didn't know who their state board rep was before they came to a student advisory committee meeting. And obviously we don't want that to be the case. And it could be a cool way to get the board more exposure, but also to get high school students interested in the SAC. And then also some more like fun events, like outdoor activity days, especially as we're ramping up towards in-person learning again. I know students are definitely craving the opportunity to be outside and to do fun things. And I've always thought it would be really cool if the state board could do something. Obviously, the state board has a lot on their plate right now, but if there could be like a annual something like a tug of war or field day sort of thing for students to come out and they're having fun, but they're also learning about the state board and learning about how they can become involved. And then last is pop-up tents outside metro stations. That's something that I think is realistic that the student advisory committee can organize itself next year, throughout the year, in terms of like figuring out good dates for the SAC members to go to certain metro stations, and maybe they have a state board rep with them and they're just sort of passing out flyers to people and telling them, listen, there's no GPA requirement. If it's in the middle of the year, honestly, you just have to give us an email and we'll put you on the list and you're invited to a meeting. Everyone's open to come. And this is something we want as many people as possible to join the SAC. And it's not something that we're looking for the highest academic performing student. We're looking for everyone who is interested in making schools better place for students to learn. With that, that is the end of our PowerPoint presentation. So thank you all for listening. And now we will open ourselves up to any questions that you guys have.
Thank you very much. Dr. Reid.
Real quick with it. All right. So, I got a minute. Okay. The WMATA comp plan, I think that was a really great idea. It's also often a blind spot about what other agencies we can push for things. So kudos to y'all. Any ideas about what to include in that comp plan?
Anyone want to take the question?
Can you repeat that again? Are you referring to reaching out the SAC application?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm safe passages slides. You all mentioned the State Board of Education, which I really liked because we always like to lean on, go to council to can talk to the mayor and WMATA about making a comprehensive plan around commutes on the buses and trains. Did you all have any chance to think about what elements there could be in that plan?
I could get you into contact with Council Member Kayla Park. She is more involved in this initiative. So if
I mean, yeah, I can certainly provide your email. I can also tell you that something that I've discussed, I've heard SAC members say this, and Office of Student Advocate Dan Davis had been to a meeting previously where he like said this, but I think it would be great if the state board could look to form a partnership so that obviously there are efforts to get businesses sort of involved with Safe Passage. But I think like one thing in particular I've heard is that more than anything, like students want a place they know they can go. And I definitely refer to you the committee member Kayla Park, but I think it would be great if you could like approach these agencies and tell them we're looking to collaborate to create like opportunities for students to become aware of where they're safe. But anyone else?
I think I'm out of time, but I'm in the chat.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang.
Great, thank you. And particularly grateful for being able to work with you all in advocating for school librarians. I'm curious how, and I don't think we'll get to this in a minute, but how you engaged with other agencies like the Deputy Mayor's Office, the Chancellor, Public Charter School Board, and other groups beyond ours. And if you have any recommendations for how we might, from the DC SBOE side, think about building bridges or not with those other bodies.
Well, I can say I think a part of the challenges that SAC's had is that we probably haven't had as much like a relationship with other agencies as we've wanted. And I think apart from guest speakers, but Gary, go ahead.
I did get the opportunity to work with Miss Elizabeth Davis before she passed, and she got us a meeting with the Chancellor. And what I would say is how to, as the state board, to present these. I believe the question was, how do you, if I'm right, how would you present these things to those bodies, right, Mr. Chang? Right. I would say be very blunt, like what Reagan said. I mean, it's very blunt on the importance of a librarian in a school. And even if you need to, just grab any student out of DC and just ask them, how has your librarian affected you? And bring that to your chancellor or your mayor and show them what a librarian really holds to a student, especially to people like me.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. O'Leary.
I've enjoyed seeing y'all on screens. I can't wait to see you live next year. But one thing that I'm always talking about is we need to lift every voice in order to get change made. And I can't wait for a hyperactive, larger committee to be able to work with us and to go knock on or knock down doors to get things done. And this is, y'all are much more, the most active student committee that we've had as long as I've been on the board. And I know it's going to be even more active next year. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening. Thank you for the thoughtful recommendations. I have a question. So I am on the, what are we calling it? Advocacy and Outreach Committee. And one of the things that we have focused in on is safe passage. I know this is something Representative Sutter is particularly concerned with as well, and kind of broadening the definition of safe passage to include not just like violence, so like safe places to go, but literally like the challenges that come with just dealing with cars and bikers and everything else. And I'm curious if you all see that also as an issue, and if that's something we should be considering.
Absolutely. I think that by just considering one means of transportation alone, there's an entire there's not one means by which students get to school, and there's not one concern that stops students from being able to get to school. I think that in many times I apologize. I think there needs to be a holistic approach taken to how students take certain routes and take certain modes of transportation.
You mind if I pick it up for you? There's something that went on. If you want to reach out to the PE teacher, I'm gonna hurry up for the 20 seconds over. PE teacher at my school, he held this really big thing, and I was very, very surprised by how many students he got to come out and ride these bikes during COVID. And what you just said was, it was really amazing how you just said that, because I was just thinking about it. providing students with bikes is a good way to get around, especially for younger ones that need to get to school. That's like right around the corner. And it was just really shocking to me how these students were utilizing the bikes. Even students that I saw myself from a private school view didn't really care about their education, but they cared enough to do this with the school and to actively participate continuously.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wattenberg.
So first, just to reiterate what others have said, it's been a great advisory committee all year long. I thought your presentation was terrific and the recommendations were terrific. So really just, claps, cheers, everything for you. I'm really very impressed. The question I have, I want to go back to the presentations and sort of what you all talked about in terms of the distance learning, which I really did think was fascinating and just great. And this idea that we should keep what was good and, obviously ditch what wasn't, but one idea that was there in two different ways was Wellness Wednesdays and Asynchronous Wednesdays. And so my question is, I think two different people wrote those words on two different slides, if I'm remembering right. And I'm wondering, do they mean the same thing? Do they come out of the same idea? Are these two different ideas? So talk a little.
I think it's just asynchronous for every day except for Wednesday, because Wednesdays we had that day off. So it was asynchronous for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays.
But did you appreciate those Wednesdays because of mental health, or because you got to do whatever you wanted to do, or you got to catch up, or like what?
Everything. It helped with like our wellness, and it helped me to catch up on some work that I needed to do. And it just gave me a little bit of time to relax if I had nothing else to do. So.
Gary?
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit on because that Wednesday was a lot, especially a big stress reliever from having to have glasses on and look at a screen for a whole bunch of periods of time, and to do work that was also given on that Wednesday and the days before.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. I want to pick up on the safe passage piece for a minute. So one thing I heard from students in Ward 6, and a lot of this was from elementary and middle school students, but was concern about interacting with traffic as they cross the streets. And so thinking about how we look at not just sort of lots of different ways students get to school, but also how we might talk about, to the point raised by a few of my colleagues, how our work in education connects with other agencies and how we think about using education as a connection point for that. So for instance, people like to drive real fast when they drive through DC, if they don't see DC as a place that is theirs, but a place they're traveling through to get somewhere else. So how might we use safe passage conversations about ways to like put in speed tables or put in more stop signs or put in more ways to say like, young people go to school here and they need to be safe. What is, from a student perspective, how could we do that well so that it serves all kids, not just little kids whose parents might be worried about this, but also folks your age who are getting to school every day on your own?
I hope y'all don't mind me picking up this one as well, because I actually lost a friend last year because she was hit by a car crossing New York Avenue. And I believe that especially in those areas that have those busy roads, that even if it is a busy road, that you should put a camera and a speed limit sign like you see in other areas, and that it's important that you put the hours down and that the people know, even if you got to put up 1 million, it doesn't matter. It should be, people that are driving should know that it's a school zone, and that even if they're speeding, they deserve a ticket, like how there's a ticket on 295 that'll give you $300. That they need that same thing on New York Avenue and these Minnesota Avenue and all these other places where children walk around multiple times.
I appreciate that, Gary, and I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you for that insight.
I would yield my time or add my time so that Reagan can answer the question too.
Thanks, Rep. Gasoi.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think that definitely one of the biggest considerations that you said when it's people consider DC not a place that's theirs, but a place they're driving through. I think that this is not just on an educational standpoint, but I think on a more general DC scale, it's the fact that people don't view DC as a community. They don't view it as a place where people live. They view it as a tourist destination or a place where decisions are made. So I think that this is definitely something that should be talked about on a broader scale, either be via, it could be done via public messages, billboards and such. It needs to be established that DC is a place where people grow up and not just a place where everyone else's laws are established.
I appreciate that so much, Reagan. I definitely see that in Ward 6 as we see lots of folks come through on their way to work, but I like that DC is a place where people grow up is really an important aspect. Any other thoughts from young people on the safe passage question? Then I'll yield back my time to my colleagues.
I can add something in case if Leah or Emily, you guys want to go. I just think in general for a lot of students, I feel that like when we're discussing any issue that affects students, I kind of feel like we go to students last in terms of who we're hearing from. We'll often like target our like our feedback from like parents or teachers, and then I feel like we kind of skip over students because we assume that the parents or teachers will advocate for us, which may be true, but we kind of neglect students in that role. So I think just concerting more of an effort to actually hear from students. I think the student advisory committee is definitely a great way just to start of like coming and asking them what they think. But I also think it would be cool if board members could dedicate some of their time, maybe if they plan their next event, in terms of getting students from their ward, just to ask them what they think on issues, because I think sometimes their answers may surprise you.
Thank you very much. Members, we're going to move on to, sorry, President Parker, did you have a question? I apologize.
Yes, thank you. And kudos to all of you for your work over the last year and producing a great report. We will be sure to pass on these recommendations to members of the council, as well as partners at OSSI and the Deputy Mayor's office. So again, thank you. I did want to follow up on the theme of safe passage. I really appreciate the focus on like safe hubs and partnering with businesses and other entities to, create safe spaces as students journey to and from schools. I didn't see it in the report. I also asked Representative O'Sullivan around discussions regarding engagements between students and police personnel. I know that has been a big topic and focus for students, at least in Ward 5, both in terms of Metro police personnel as well as police personnel in schools. And so while that's not a formal recommendation or topic, I would love to give each of you maybe a few, let's say 20 seconds or so, just to share thoughts, either that you've heard, that you've discussed, or your own personal feelings regarding how we might improve the relationship there. And Gary, who's done a great job representing Dunbar tonight. Let's start with you.
Before we go to you, Gary, can we go to Leah, who hasn't got a chance to?
Thank you, Alex. I would like to say that I definitely feel like transportation to and from school is another big thing that a lot of students worry about and struggle with, because I personally feel like a lot of neighborhoods aren't so safe for students, and I know that transportation is everywhere in DC. So I definitely feel like maybe WMATA should team up and come up with some type of solution for students to feel more safe on certain buses or trains and things like that to help us. I definitely can put the word into WMATA. My dad, he's a supervisor for the Metro, so I definitely will put the word in about safe passage for the students this upcoming school year.
Please do. And student representatives, that is my time. I do want to hear your thoughts though, so please utilize the chat or feel free to reach out to me. And Gary, sorry that I wasn't able to hear from you, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you again, members of our Student Advisory Committee. We are all giving you virtual rounds of applause for the great work that you've done. And we are really excited to champion your recommendations and move them forward. So thank you again. We are now going to move to the administrative, we are now going to move to the administrative items on our agenda, which includes our teacher retention report. Since 2018, the state board has prioritized research to better understand teacher and school leader attrition rates in the district. Teacher and principal attrition is defined as the rate at which educators and school leaders leave their post on a yearly basis to teach at or lead another school or exit the profession entirely. Such attrition is a persistent challenge for school districts nationwide, but is particularly a challenge here in DC. Tonight, the state board will consider the adoption of an updated teacher retention report commissioned by the state board and prepared by Mayor Levy, which documents teacher and principal attrition rates for both DCPS and public charter schools using a combination of local data records acquired through the oversight function of the Council of the District of Columbia and from the Freedom of Information Act, otherwise known as FOIA requests. To date, the district still lacks a publicly accessible annual teacher data set that can be used as a baseline. So like the previous teacher and principal attrition reports, data were again extracted from other records and manually assembled and cleaned. This report breaks down attrition by grade level, sector, and in some cases, and in the case of DCPS, teacher impact ratings. Among the updated report's findings are the average annual teacher attrition over the last 6 years at the school level in both District of Columbia Public Schools and public charter schools has been about 25%. A quarter of teachers are leaving our classrooms on an annual basis, and that has largely remained consistent for the last 6 years. The DCPS rate has trended downward over the last few years from 20% in school year 2018 to 19 to about 17% in school years 2019 and 20. Public charter school attrition rates, on the other hand, dropped in school year 2020 to 23% after having increased every year since school year 2016-17. Annual teacher attrition in DCPS neighborhood school remains the highest in wards 5 and ward 8 at about 25% each. These trends are down from previous years averaging, when then they averaged around 30%. Also, in both DCPS and charter schools, the rate of annual teacher departure rises with the percentage of students designated as at risk. Schools with the highest percentage of students designated at risk lose almost a quarter of its teachers each year, which indicates a downward trend from previous years showing teacher attrition rates of 29% for each year. Put differently, schools that are educating more students designated at risk see more teachers leaving the classrooms annually. And lastly, annual teacher attrition is the highest in DCPS middle and high schools at about 25% compared to 18% in DCPS elementary schools. These findings and more can be seen in our full report available on the State Board's website and within tonight's public meeting attachments. The State Board has not drawn any definitive conclusions as to whether the recent downward rates of teacher attrition are attributed to positive changes in system and school level policies or due to the uncertainties of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the report notes, quote, teacher turnover in the district is still higher than anywhere else, not just in the nation, but in any other city. Rates of departure vary greatly from school to school, but almost all are still in double digits, and they are significantly higher in schools serving students designated at risk. The State Board has appreciated the engagement from districts, education agencies, OSSE, the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education, DCPS, the DC Public Charter School Board, and numerous other stakeholders since 2018 related to this work. The issue of teacher attrition has been a consistent part of the education policy discussion in DC and continues to be amplified as we work to identify appropriate policy solutions. Yet even with this increased discussion, the issue of teacher attrition is still of utmost importance as the district recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Teachers, now more than ever, need the social and emotional health supports and systematic changes in place to ensure that they continue to be valued, uplifted, and properly engaged in their schools. The state board's work and this updated report continues to provide promising steps towards a better understanding of teacher attrition in the district and a possible way of good things to come for our schools. I encourage our viewing public to fully review the findings of our state board's teacher and principal attrition in the district's public schools report, ask questions, share insights, and work with us to better understand the imperative issue that affects every school, student, and community in the district. Before I would just end by saying research tells us, and it is widely known, that teachers are the most significant factor impacting our students' learning. And so the reason why this should be a paramount concern for everyone, not only in DC, but across the country, is that a quarter of our educators are leaving our classrooms annually, which has devastating impacts on culture, continuity, on planning, and consistency for our students' learning and planning. So with that, is there a motion to adopt the report?
So moved.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the adoption of the report?
Yes.
Representative O'Leary.
Yes, I'd like to, and I've sent it to everyone, put forward an amendment to delete the end of the report, beginning right after you finished reading, as a matter of fact. We've got some recommendations, but I would rather have more discussion from the board on the recommendations. And I would also like to welcome the public with it, since it's public knowledge. And also, since we have a new superintendent in Utsey and we're all gonna, we've been invited to talk with her. I would like to have that conversation before we add the recommendations.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. There is a motion on the floor to adapt the report to essentially truncate and delete for public posting the recommendations portion of the report until a later date after there is room for discussion with the public as well as partners at Utsey and elsewhere. Is there a second to this motion?
Point of order. Do we already have an active motion on the floor? Where's John Paul?
Mr. President?
Yes.
So an amendment is on the is germane to this report.
Yes.
And so it is allowed to be amended for the secondary motion for the original motion. But it does need a second in order to proceed.
Second.
It has been seconded. Yes, Mr. Hayward.
So then, so now we will move to discussion on the amendment.
Got it. All right. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Representative Thompson.
Thanks, Sutter. I might have been quicker on the draw, but I sit on the Educator Practice Committee, and I'm going to offer what I offered yesterday. I think it's actually really important that we continue engagement, and I think that's the work of the Educator Practice Committee. I also think it's really important that this report have recommendations attached to it, especially given some of our actions this week, like transmitting that legislation to council. I feel really uncomfortable striking that, given this report and this data was used as a rationale kind of to do so. And while I don't, I was a history major, you can't rewrite history. You just kind of go from the point where you are. And so I know that Caitlin actually has suggested, and I know that there was other context provided today about where these recommendations came from, how they were part of a commission report. I think adding maybe just a few sentences to the report that clarify where the recommendations came from and leave room for the Educator Practice Committee to continue to do work, both with the public and with OSSE's new leadership, is really important. But I particularly feel uncomfortable striking the full set of recommendations, given we literally just took actions around those recommendations.
Thank you, Representative Sutter.
I will follow on what Rep. Thompson just said and concur that we've already taken action on one of the recommendations. The other, we've spent 3 working sessions hearing from OSSE about the educator preparation program regulations. And so we'll be taking action on that. And as I understood from the email chain earlier today, we have already as a board adopted the other recommendations. So sort of in line with what the advocacy committee is doing, we're re-upping things we've already said we're going to do and placing them again before the public to note that these are commitments the board has made and intends to keep. So what I would wonder about is, unless we don't intend to keep these, that would be the only reason I could see us taking off. But then I have a bigger question, which is, why would we adopt something previously, not discuss it as a board, and then take it off the table? As I understand it, we adopted these, we intend to keep these, we're putting them before the public again to reaffirm that commitment. And I would be in favor of keeping the recommendations in the report with that understanding.
Thank you, Representative Sutter. Representative Reid.
Oh, yes, I had to do some digging to get caught up to speed on what was going on with the report. So to my knowledge, recommendations were generated from data from the current report and in a previous report. So 2 pieces I don't think that we will necessarily arrive to. I mean, I do agree with the point of public engagement always. I don't necessarily think we'll arrive to any new recommendations. I also know there was a recommendation about the leadership component that folks were a little nervous about. And I think that's up to par of national trends. I know 2 professional organizations that I'm a part of where they interviewed teachers for one, and then related service providers who also pointed to leadership. And I think it's within the scope of OSSE to possibly provide as a state to get our leaders on the same page. So that's, I guess, my I appreciate Representative Frazier or O'Leary for raising it, but I don't think it would enhance the report to take those recommendations out. I think we can move forward and get to work, which we've already got to work.
Thank you, Representative Reid. Representative O'Leary.
The reason that, besides the fact that the transparency thing has already gone to the, so we thought that maybe that should come out, but the language in some of the recommendations, as you know, were on the last report a year and a half ago. And I would like to get more input on the language in the recommendations to have a little more oomph to them after we've talked with the new superintendent and also shared the report. Maybe some of the people that we want to talk to about the report haven't seen the report yet. And I don't sense the urgency to pass it at this particular meeting. We've got another meeting next month. And hopefully we'll have met with the new superintendent between now and that time.
Certainly not during recess. Joke. Representative or Vice President Gasoi.
Thank you. I would support this amendment because I guess, to Representative O'Leary's point, these recommendations were in response to a different report. I don't think that we necessarily want to have a precedent where we take recommendations from one report and attach them to another without discussion of like, are there changes in the data that would make us come to different recommendations, or at least to modify the recommendations we did make? And I don't see, I mean, I understand the argument that, you know, a report should have recommendations, but I also think that there's value in a report that just has information and that we follow, as long as we follow up with recommendations. So I would support this amendment.
Thank you, Vice President Gasoi. Representative Reid, is that a new hand or is that from before?
Before.
I'm sorry, I said Representative Reid. Representative Thompson, is that a new hand or from before?
Oh, it's a new hand.
Okay. Thompson.
So I feel very strongly that our review of this at the working session would have been the time to say, like, we want to make different recommendations and given us as a board to really grapple with like our options. I don't, as far as sense of urgency, I actually do think we created a sense of urgency when we transmitted that legislation to council. Now, I fully understand there are deadlines that they have, and the reason that if we didn't do it this week, it was not going to be on the, it was shrivel and die for the year. I get that. But in doing that, we can't then say we're not, like, we should not set a precedent for moving forward with something. We literally just move forward with something. Like, we would have, I knew that it was something we were considering reintroducing. I don't think as a new member, I ever was afforded the opportunity to vote on the legislation or when we were doing that or why we were doing it. I do, though, fully understand having been able to ask some questions at the Educator Practice Committee about why that was so important. Like, I actually think that was really important. And I now have that context. I think in order, because I believe that's important, and I really appreciated the context that both Representative O'Leary and Representative Gasoi shared, is one of the reasons I'm pushing to say, like, we actually should keep these recommendations. And we should put in full context, which really will require a couple of sentences saying where they came from. And we should also continue to do engagement, but to not actually tie our report, which is the data, to any recommendation seems like a huge missed opportunity. It's not a place where we want to sink public discussion and say, like, that's it, we're never going to talk about this again. It's not like we're not going to continue to pay attention to teacher retention, but to have a leg to stand on as the SBOE and saying, like, this is important to release a report and it not be tied to a recommendation that no one raised any issues with at the working session, practically, like pragmatically, I just struggle with. And I don't, so I'm someone who typically does not like to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's why I am on this. It's like these things are largely good. I totally think we can strive for more engagement and to do better. But as I have listened and learned more about our push around the importance of teacher retention, I want to give that the best shot we possibly can.
Representative Wattenberg.
I am struggling with this. I wonder, I hear what people are saying. Obviously, the process wasn't great. As a former president, I can say, sadly, sometimes the process isn't great. It happens. We need to get better. And I wish that, there had been a fuller discussion of the recommendations. I guess what I would say is, I do think it is very important. I would like to, and I also don't like going over the recommendation of the relevant committee. And so one proposal that I would make, and if there's interest, I can make it as a motion, but what if we put forward the recommendation on behalf of the legislation, so that we're, as people have said, let's use this to drive support for that. Let's have that as a recommendation. And then we can come back subsequently with a fuller set of recommendations after there's been discussion at the committee and so on.
Representative O'Leary.
I wish we'd have had this discussion. All right, because that's basically what why I brought this up. And can I withdraw my amendment?
You can.
Okay, I want to withdraw my amendment.
All right. The amendment is withdrawn from Representative O'Leary. We have a motion.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
President Parker. But because, you know, I don't even want to have a vote where people are not satisfied with this, because it's the amendment isn't the important thing. The important thing is everything that came up in this discussion. And that was that we've got to keep the pedal to the metal on not just the legislation, which has already gone in, but on culture, on all the other things that are in the recommendation that haven't been moved on by the systems themselves. So that's why I think that, I mean, I love being on this board, and I love the unanimity of this board and almost everything that we voted on since January. And so I'm withdrawing it. That's why.
Thank you for that thoughtful response. With Representative O'Leary's withdrawing of the amendment, we return to the motion at hand, which is to adopt the teacher and principal attrition report. It has been properly moved and seconded. Vice President Gasoi.
I have an amendment.
Can you state that as a motion?
Oh, I would like to move to amend a section of, I don't know how to say this. So I move to amend one of the recommendations. Is that how I do it?
Can you be more specific in order to solicit a second?
I recommend that we remove on page 5 the following text, that we create statewide professional development program for school level leadership, or that OSSE create a statewide professional development program for school level leadership, that the state board encourages OSSE to consider implementing a statewide professional development program that is directed toward training school level leadership. According to the state board's 2020 DC teacher attrition study, leadership was routinely cited as the biggest driver of teachers' experiences at the school. While there is no singular panacea to improve school level leadership, a statewide discussion and implementation of successful and appropriate professional development strategies for both school leaders and both sectors should be considered.
Thank you. Is there a second? Going once. Is there a second? Going twice. Vice President Gasoi, I'm not seeing anyone's here moving to second your motion.
Can I withdraw? No, I'm just kidding. That's fine.
All right, we are going to go back to the original motion, which was moved and seconded, which is to adopt the report as is tonight. And so with that, Mr. Hayworth, may you please call the roll?
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Aye.
Dr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan. Mr. O'Sullivan. President Parker.
Aye.
The report is adopted.
Thank you. And Representative O'Leary, I do honor your concern around engaging the public. And so I do want us to go back and think about how we can do that over the next couple of months, understanding that there's a period of recess in the next few weeks. But thank you for that discussion. Vice President Gasoi, was there a question or comment there?
Yeah, I mean, do we have discussion at this point or are we moving on now? Okay.
We're going to move on, but I can give you the floor if you had a question or a comment.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Members, we heard earlier from our Student Advisory Committee and had discussion around the report. We are now going to consider and vote on that report. Again, I want to thank the Student Advisory Committee and our fantastic representatives, Representative O'Sullivan and Dale, for their dedication this year. Members, is there a motion to adopt the Student Advisory Committee annual report?
So moved.
It has been moved. I believe Representative Sutter may have got it in. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Is there further discussion on the committee's report?
They did a fabulous job. And we can't wait to get them all back to work.
Ditto. Representative Sutter.
Thank you. I'll just add that I think this board has talked before about the value our students bring and about the reason we often talk about ideas around changing regulations to allow our students to vote and have their voices heard. I just want to commend our students on making sure that this report covered the breadth of education issues facing students in the district. It would be pretty easy as students to pick something of interest and go deep on it, but they instead picked a variety of things and went deep on all of them. So one, I think that's a testament to the work they do. Two, it's a testament to the leadership of our two student representatives who really, I think, do an excellent job of leading their peers as committee chairs. And I always find it impressive. And I think it's a good rationale for us to continue to consider the power we give to student voice in DC, because our young people are, as they say, the kids are all right. And as I watch larger political discussions take place, both locally and nationally, I think perhaps we might do well to turn more over to our young people sooner rather than later. I'll end on those words, but kudos to our students, and I look forward to adopting this report.
Hear, hear. Representative Thompson.
I also look forward to adopting this report. I agree with much of what not just Representative Sutter just shared, but what our colleagues, the gratitude our colleagues have showed and interest they've showed, both in them presenting this final report, but also just in engaging with the Student Advisory Committee throughout this, whatever kind of pandemic year we've had. I hope that we can rise to the challenge that the student reps have put before us of being responsive to their recommendations. I think we've started to do that by incorporating their recommendation of broadening the number of student representatives. And I look forward to just their continued leadership. So I just want to express my gratitude and, just appreciate you all as colleagues.
Representative O'Sullivan, if you don't mind, I'm going to save you for last because I want to give you the last word. Representative Reid.
Thank you for that. Yes, I would definitely love Representative O'Sullivan to close us with something much better than whatever I'm about to say. I really appreciate that you all set the tone of not just identifying issues, but offering a recommendation for every issue that you found. I encourage you all to continuously think outside the box. There's no wrong answer that you can think of, just a creative solution that you can come up with. So I like that spirit. Keep it up.
Absolutely. And I would just go on record again as saying how appreciative I am of the Student Advisory Committee. There are countless hours on top of doing schoolwork. I heard from Representative O'Sullivan and Dale often around how they were taking this assessments and had to prep for this and study. And so to dedicate the hours necessary to put together such a thoughtful report doesn't go unnoticed. And we are truly appreciative. One of the things that I am looking forward to proposing to the chairman is to see if the committee of the whole will be willing to host a special roundtable for our student advisory members. And so we're going to push on that. I'm saying it publicly so that there is a bit of accountability to that. But I do think these recommendations should be part of a broader discussion that our city is having. And so our students can lead. And I just want to end on a special note of appreciation for you, Representative O'Sullivan. I think in addition to your fro getting a little bit bigger every meeting, you have really led the Student Advisory Committee with grace and grit and thoughtfulness. And you should be really proud. And we are forever indebted to your service to the board. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Gasoi, and then the last word will go to Representative O'Sullivan.
I'm going to be super brief. I mean, President Parker said what I want to say, which is we really appreciate the SAC, but I want to give you special props, Representative O'Sullivan, for really pushing the envelope actually on what the SAC does and, being a real visionary. Because you have expanded the role and elevated it to a much greater level than it had been before. And so I just am really grateful to know you and to have you on our side. So thank you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Representative O'Sullivan. Turn it over to you.
Thanks, President Parker. Thanks, Vice President Gasoi, and thanks to all of you guys for the kind words, everything you guys have said about the committee. I've definitely been honored to just work alongside you guys. And I hope that you guys can show your gratitude for everything the Student Advisory Committee has done by reading the report. It's like 13 pages or something, but I have faith in you guys to do it. And I'm pretty sure the recommendations are like bolded. So just take a look. Obviously, there were a lot of things in the presentation. But there were some other things we couldn't get to. And every single recommendation and thing that's there was something that was brought up in a meeting or discussed. So it would just be awesome if you guys could take a look. And I'm super excited, President Parker, that you're telling that you'll be telling Chairman Mendelson to see what we can do with the Student Advisory Committee. I know all of the people who were here presenting it today were very grateful for the opportunity to come and speak before you guys. I know it's an experience a lot of them won't forget, being able to be here with you guys and share their thoughts. And I look forward in the next couple months as well with the student representative expanding to 4 people and with everything the Student Advisory Committee can do going forward. I think I said it last meeting, but the SAC has the potential to be a very influential group here in the city for our education. And I think if it's something that we can continue to give our students enough support, we will reap the benefits in the future. And so I've been super excited for this past year and the next year as well. It's going to be great. And yeah, please read the report, act on the recommendations, promote the application for the SAC and student representative. I think the last day is Sunday. I don't know what the number is now, but hopefully we can get it to whatever number that I know John Paul and some other people are hoping for. But thank you guys. And I'm looking forward to you guys adopting this report as well.
Thank you, Representative O'Sullivan. With that, Mr. Hayworth, can you call the roll?
Dr. Gasoi.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Yes.
Dr. Sutter.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Oh, an enthusiastic aye.
Dr. Reid.
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Aye.
President Parker.
Aye.
The report is unanimously adopted.
Whoa, whoa.
Sorry, Dr. O'Leary. Sorry.
Aye, aye.
Now it is officially unanimously adopted. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Members, we are now at the new business portion of our meeting. Are there any items of new business or announcements that members would like to make? And while we're in this section, Mr. Hayworth, if you could just provide an update on where we are with applications, that would be great. Representative Reid.
Yes, while you're taking a break, but also interviewing principals, I believe, according to the protocol from Rep. Wattenberg, please ask principals, parents, families, anybody interested in education, if they have any research interests, if you can collect that information so that we can bring it to the RPP, get some engagement, 2-for-1 engagement there. That's it. Enjoy your recess. Don't call me.
Wait, actually, can I ask you to explain that a little more? What did you want us to ask them if they're interested in?
Oh, if they have any, am I on mute? Oh no, okay. If they have any ideas for research topics around education, things that they want to know more information on, study, those kind of things, so that
RPP, got you, sorry.
Yep. Thanks.
And if they're from high school, we can use them to recruit for the SAC. So.
Thank you, Representative Reid. Representative Sutter.
Thanks. I was trading some notes about this with Representative Thompson, so wanted to just extend this more broadly. On the safe passage conversation extending to traffic safety, I'm plotting some things in Ward 6 for the return to school buildings linked to safe passage and traffic. So if anyone else is interested in having conversations about how that might work in your wards in conjunction with the return to school, thinking about sort of traffic safety hotspots and how they connect school zones, I'd be very happy to talk with folks either over the recess or just after so that we can time it for the return to school. Ideas are still forming for me, but I'll share this much. One of our local bloggers has talked about dangerous traffic hotspots in the neighborhood and began collecting information sort of crowdsourced. And so I've connected with her to learn a little bit more about the places that were called out so that we could map those to our schools and basically start to connect this to say, if the mayor's committed to Vision Zero, Charles Allen, had the Vision Zero omnibus amendment, I'd love to see them place these enforcement actions aligned to schools. We've got 200 some odd schools in the city. If we put all these traffic safety enforcement measures around schools, we'd attack multiple problems at once. We would make sure that our students and children were safe. We would deal with traffic safety, and we could really align these issues in a way that people pay attention to. So I'm plotting and planning for Ward 6, but I'm happy to connect with any members who want to do this in other wards as we lead back to school.
Thank you, Representative Sutter. Representative O'Leary.
Just a reminder to those people who at the last meeting that we had said they were going to get in touch with me about picking up books. I still have them. And I know who you are. So if you'd like to give me a call and we can meet and I can deliver the books to you to give them to the people in your community or whatever you'd like to go. And the second thing is I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
I will not entertain a second just yet, only because we still have hands. Representative.
Oh, I'm sorry, but she's already chewed me out on the text. So
Call me Frazier. No,
Thompson.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
This is actually, it's brief. It's building on what Representative Sutter was just talking about with safe passage. So most people know we had a whole bridge fall down in Ward 7 off the highway.
It didn't fall down, it was pushed.
And it fell down, okay? Like bridges shouldn't fall down. That's not a thing. So we had a whole bridge fall down over 295. I did testify at the roundtable about the particular 295 bridge. Representative Reid put in the chat that there is a safe passage hearing happening October 12th or 14th-ish, whenever the council gets their schedule together. But myself and the other commissioners who testified really did zone in on this issue of like traffic as a safe passage issue and how communities who are largely low-income African-American are the ones who have been affected by things like the way we draw highways. We are working with council members Chang, Henderson, and Gray to actually host a walk so people can experience a little bit of what I experienced when I was in middle school and walking across its sister bridges. And so we will let you know how that goes, but I will also just share that the record is still open for the 295 bridge collapse. Is open until the 25th. And so if there are members who just want to share their experiences with safe passage, since this is flagged as an issue, I would encourage them to go on the record because it is something those council members are currently paying attention to because, you know, sometimes a crisis tends to be an opportunity. So I will update the board offline around what comes out of that experience, but it is expanding the conversation on what safe passage looks like in communities across the city.
Absolutely. I would extend the invitation for discussions around the framework, our STAR framework and community engagement. I think there are some great opportunities here to collaborate across wards, maybe do joint ward efforts to hear from parents, community members. And so anyone interested in teaming up, I would be happy to do that, namely my colleagues in Ward 7 and 8, as I think like some of the reflections would be really powerful across wards. I also just would highlight again our historic introduction of our teacher legislation this week. As was mentioned before, Vice President Gasoi and I are continuing to have conversations with council members to push and amplify the cause and how it's connected to the report that we adopted today in addressing teacher attrition. And then last but not least, as was mentioned earlier, we had a great discussion with Dr. Grant. She is looking forward to having one-on-ones and reaching out to each of you, but also finding ways that there were two things that I shared, I was going to say push, but shared that it would be great for her and the ICT to lean in on. One is the plan that we've heard a lot about and the need that neighbors, residents aren't, for whatever reason, aren't understanding what the plan is. And so I have asked her and the IC team to be much more deliberate in reaching out. What I offered was to do a joint Ward 5 based community meeting. She seemed excited by that option. I welcomed her to collaborate with each of you to do something in your wards as well, just to make sure parents and neighbors have what the plan is. And then the second thing is following up on the push from Representative Thompson to just make sure that we are continuing to engage the community around our state plan to the U.S. Department of Education, even though it's now after the fact. But there are ways that we can continue to engage. And she too seemed open to that idea. So just wanted to put that on the record, and we will continue to follow up there as well. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I thought Frazier was going to get it.
Vice President Gasoi has made a
already jumped into
Vice President Gasoi has made a motion to adjourn our meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Frankie joins it in the aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. It is now 9:34 p.m. and this meeting of the State Board of Education is now adjourned. Thank you, members, and to members of the public.
Have a good recess.
Bye.
I thought we had a meeting next month.
Bye.
If somebody said it was August 18th, I heard August 18th.
We
What was
do, but that's the end of our recess. So it's from now till then.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's the,
Good. I'm
the
glad.
marker.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. I thought